Have you ever played a video game that was so good, it made it more difficult to enjoy other games in a similar genre because by comparison, they just don't stack up? Because Portal 2 was that for me. It was a puzzle game that was so good that I sought out other puzzle games, but none could ever match the quality. Now, the first Portal game was really mind-blowing at the time. From a technical standpoint, I'm still not completely sure how they managed to pull this off, having the portals that show what's in the portal, and you can watch yourself go in the portal in a circle, and it's mind-boggling. Just the starting room in Portal is mind-boggling. And then they built an entire game around it, which was a lot of fun. It was a puzzle game, and every time you solved the puzzle, you would get some taunts from the Overlord AI who would tease you and mock you and jab at you a little bit. I feel like that's one of the big reasons why Portal and Portal 2 work so well for me. In other puzzle games, your only reward after solving a puzzle is more puzzles, but in at least Portal 1, there was a bit of flavor at the end of every level.
Well done, Android. The Enrichment Center once again reminds you that Android Hell is a real place where you will be sent at the first sign of defiance.
Even if you were getting frustrated with the puzzle, you wanted to see the end of it because you knew there was going to be something funny at the end, something humorous, something to keep you entertained, an incentive. Those are the two aspects that make the first Portal game really stand out. Technically, it's incredibly impressive. And from a design standpoint, it keeps drawing you toward the end, dangling the carrot of humor that you can't help but want to pursue. The first game in the series was impressive enough, and they very well could have made a sequel that was just more of the same. But Portal 2 stepped it up even more. Everything about Portal 2 is bigger and grander and more impressive. The portaling mechanics return, now coupled with light walkways, beam redirection puzzles, and fluids that can change the slipperiness or the repulsion of a given surface. It's also a much longer game. There's a lot more to dig into here, but it doesn't get boring because it keeps things varied. Again, there's more than just the portal mechanics, there's more mechanics too, but also the game is divided into different acts, sometimes with a different Overlord AI telling you what to do, or sometimes you don't have an Overlord AI at all and you have to figure things out for yourself. And there's an actual story being told. The first Portal game didn't really have a story so much as it had a premise. But Portal 2 builds on this starting point from the first Portal game and tells a really compelling story. It's a tale of revenge and betrayal and deception.
They told me never, never, ever to disengage myself from my management rail, or I would die. One. Catch me, catch! Ow! Ow. I am not dead! I'm not dead!
There's also a lot of action in Portal 2, a lot of suspenseful moments and chase sequences. It's a puzzle game that is also sometimes quite thrilling. More so than almost any other puzzle game, it is memorable. And not only is there an amazing single-player campaign, but also a cooperative campaign. And it's not just the main campaign with a second player tagging along, it's an entirely new, albeit somewhat shorter, campaign that you can go through with a friend. And it is a blast and a half. The only real downside for this game that I can think of is that it is a pretty difficult puzzle game at times. I went back to it recently, and even though I had beaten it several times previously, there were still some sections I struggled with. There are absolutely some real head-scratchers in this game, and I would have appreciated a bit more guidance, perhaps a hint system, to help with the tougher puzzles, so I didn't get frustrated and give up and have to look for the solution online, which kind of kills the fun of it. That's the biggest reason why I would hesitate to rate this game higher. I like it, but when I play it, all too often I find myself getting frustrated. But like I said, it's still one of my favorite puzzle games. It really set a high bar for any other puzzle games to follow afterward, and there are very few puzzle games I've played since then that can meet the high mark of quality.
Oh, brilliant! You did find a portal gun! Do you know what? It just goes to show, people with brain damage are the real heroes in the end, aren't they, at the end of the day? Brave. Come on through!
Oh, minor civilization, Vatican City.
Oh, you found the Vatican! Wait.
Yeah?
How does Vatican City exist when Christianity isn't a thing yet?
Sid Meier's Civilization 5. It's a board game / resource management game where you're trying to develop the most productive and best society, competing with other neighboring societies who are also trying to be the best. From the moment you begin, you have no idea what the world is going to look like, what resources are nearby, who your neighbors are going to be, and whether or not they're going to be aggressively hostile or not. But as the game continues, you learn this information, you learn what is nearby, and you have to make tough decisions about what's best for your society. If your city is settled on fertile ground, you might want to emphasize building your population first, because the more people you have, the more they can produce. Or if there is a very precious resource nearby, perhaps you should send out a couple of settlers and settle a second city so you could add that to your society. Maybe you'll discover that you've got a hostile neighbor, and your first priority should be shoring up your defenses, making sure you have enough troops to defend yourself if they decide to attack you. Okay, I gotta keep exploring. Now, there's a lot of desert here. This is not...
Well, I thought desert was good for you. Oh no, it's Attila the Hun! His hat looks like my nipple.
Or perhaps you have a vulnerable neighbor yourself, and it might be wise to invest into the war machine to take them by force. You might even discover that you've settled on a relatively small landmass in the middle of an ocean, in which case you don't have to worry too much about being attacked by neighbors, at least not by land. But you will probably want to invest into seafaring, so you can protect your coastline and also seek out more places to settle. These are the hard choices you'll have to make, from minute to minute and then hour to hour, as the game continues and your society grows and progresses technologically to advancement. You start off only knowing how to farm, but then you learn pottery and how to worship. And then you enter the classical era and the medieval era. You develop aqueducts and metallurgy. Given a bit more time, your soldiers will learn how to use rifles, radios, and computers, and it's really amazing to watch your society grow. It's almost like cultivating a small farm. Perhaps your goal is to be the most culturally dominant civilization, so you will focus on ways to develop your culture. You'll want to build these impressive statues and monuments to attract people from all over the world. Or maybe you want to win the space race. You want to be the first one to leave orbit and land on the moon. So all your resources go into developing schools and universities, and you send out spies to neighboring civilizations to try to steal technologies from them. Or maybe you've decided that you want to be the wealthiest civilization. You develop a religion and get everyone to pay tithings to you. You create a Silk Road, and you send out different settlers to build cities near precious resources, which you can then turn around and sell to your neighbors. And of course, you gotta keep your army small, because paying soldiers costs a lot of money, and we need that money for other things. Or perhaps your civilization will be the strongest and mightiest one of all, taking advantage of all these other civilizations and their foolhardy goals of scientific advancement and cultural domination. That just makes them easy pickings. Couple of negative things have accumulated with Germany. They covet lands that we currently own suddenly.
Is one of them called Poland?
Maybe. There are a lot of different ways to play this game, a lot of different goals to pursue, and difficult decisions to make. And sometimes your fortunes shift, things do not develop the way you were hoping, and you've got to adapt. I can put hours and hours of my life into a single game of Civilization 5, and after 10-12 hours of playing it non-stop, I'll reach the end of the game and think, that was a lot of fun. I should immediately start up another game. It is deceptively addictive. You think you can set it down at any time. Well, maybe just one more turn. And maybe one more turn after that, and maybe one more turn just to finish off this building. I can't help it. It's just so fun to watch my civilization bloom and thrive. To make those hard choices. Caught between a rock and a hard place, trying to make the best of a bad situation. Well, why don't we just... don't accidentally...
Don't do that!
Okay.
You almost just launched a nuke on your own town.
I almost bombed Vatican City. You can play as the Japanese civilization and develop your unique foot soldiers, the samurai. increasing the likelihood of a military victory around the Middle Era. Or perhaps play as the Shoshone, the Native American civilization that can settle a lot of land very quickly, expand in the very, very early game, but then is going to face a lot more difficulty in the middle and late game. Every civilization has their strengths and weaknesses, which could be emboldened by favorable terrain, or exacerbated by problematic enemies nearby. But heck, if I don't have a great time playing it, I can't stay away. I'm going back over and over and over. Sometimes I'll play a casual game on an easier difficulty and just focus on building my civilization. Maybe watch some TV or listen to a podcast off to the side, not focusing too hard. Or maybe I'll raise the difficulty a bit and make it an actual challenge, force myself out of my comfort zone, and have to actually wage unpleasant wars. It's just a great game that gives you so many different customization options that allows you to play it the way you want to play. Maybe try a brand new map that is mostly comprised of islands. Play a map that is 80% Brazilian rainforest. See how that changes the pace of the game. And as if this game weren't infinitely replayable enough, it's also highly moddable. There are mods out there that improve the quality of life, expand on what's available, give you more technologies to pursue, more great wonders to build, new leaders and civilizations to control, some of which could be so well developed that they feel like they could have been built in with the game. And some of them are just plain fan service, but maybe they do interesting things, or maybe you just really like that intellectual property and you want to play it inside this game. Go for it! Play this game the way you want to play it. Set the challenge, the difficulty, the seriousness to your specifications, and just have a blast. I'm not entirely sure if I should include Overwatch in my top 25 games I enjoy list, because making a list like this and making it public is almost like giving a game your endorsement, and for every other game on this list, yeah, I would encourage people to enjoy them. But Overwatch? I'm not so sure it would be responsible of me to encourage people to start playing Overwatch now. Don't get me wrong, the game is still really good, but it does feel like being a fan of Overwatch these days, you know what you're getting into. You're agreeing to the abuse. And not just from other players, but from the company making the game itself. The core gameplay is still really fun. If you've never played it before, imagine you're put into a room with a bunch of other strangers, you're divided into two teams, you're handed foam bats and Nerf guns, and you're just let loose for 10 minutes, whacking each other, shooting each other, going crazy. Two players go off on their own to have some kind of lightsaber Jedi duel battle. Someone whips out a water balloon and throws it at you. It's chaos. It's absolute chaos, and you're just having fun. And then, at the end of 10 minutes, one of the teams is declared a winner, and then you move on to the next game. And that's the entirety of Overwatch. That's all it really is at its core fundamentals. So gameplay-wise, it's a lot of fun to play most of the time. Sometimes the teams are a little unbalanced. Sometimes it feels like you're just getting your face punched in, and that doesn't feel nice. But even if you lose in this game, as long as you had a fun time playing it, it's still a victory in a sense. And you can choose from a roster of over 20 playable characters, around 35 at this point. It's gotten really big. And each of these characters are amazingly well designed. Their visuals are stunning. They've all got professional voice actors doing a great job. The controls are tight and responsive no matter who you select. They are so well designed that I would say that any of these characters, any one of these characters, could be the protagonist of their own individual game. How many other games can boast something like that? That you have a full roster of amazing characters, every one of them great. And there's so much promotional material for all these characters. So many animated cinematics, animated storybooks, actual comics you can buy or read online. And if you were around in the early days of Overwatch, you know what joy surrounded this game. So many people were talking about it, having a good time, making animated videos, music videos, machinimas. Even if you didn't play the game, you tended to know about the game. I had a friend who is kind of out of touch with a lot of video game stuff, but the day that the playable hamster was released, he told me, hey, did you know they're adding a playable hamster to that video game you like? And I said, I know. Isn't it great? The future for this game seemed bright. There were seasonal events, there were new fun things always coming down the pipeline. It had a lot of promise. It was a well of untapped potential. And of course, here we are 8 years later, and its potential has still yet to be tapped. There's not that much excitement about the game anymore, unfortunately. I don't want to get too deep into it because, Lord knows, there are many people out there who have written entire essays. I'm sure someone's written their college thesis on how this intellectual property was so neglected and how this game has fallen from grace. It really has gone downhill. And that's a real shame because at its core, like 8 years later, it's still the same fun game, but the company making the game started neglecting it. They said, nah, we're just not going to release any content for a couple years while we create this brand new story mode for the sequel, Overwatch 2. And then 3 years later they said, whoops, no story, but there are these like story missions you could buy. And then 6 months after that they said, now the whole thing is canceled. What a kick in the teeth that is. You've got all these great characters with the potential for a really amazing story to tell, and then 8 years later, you still haven't told any of it. There are so many awful things I could talk about, like how the competitive scene was artificially infused with so much money. Like, they tried to not let it build up gradually. It wasn't organic. They just threw thousands, millions, probably billions of dollars at the competitive scene, and then a couple years later, it all came crashing down. It wasn't sustainable. So here we are 7 years after the game's release, and the competitive scene is just now starting to build up organically. Like, it's been set back 7 years. And the controversies surrounding the company, God, there's so many controversies. If you stay informed, playing Overwatch feels almost unethical given how bad this company is. And then the company got bought out by Microsoft, who's laying off a whole bunch of employees, so the future of the game looks even bleaker. And the monetization, charging $40 for skins, having brand deals with Porsche of all things. Like, there's like a dozen in-game currencies. It makes me want to puke. It feels like this game has done everything possible to push me away. The excitement is gone. All the people that used to make content have left. The only thing the community talks about these days anymore is, I don't like the way the game is balanced, or I want more overpriced skins to buy. Why aren't there more overpriced skins? And the reason there aren't more overpriced skins is because they keep on laying off people, so there's no one left to design skins. Even the promotional material seems to have dried up. We used to get these amazing cinematics, like 1 or 2 a year, and now the art team is being directed to just make these promotional ads. This is where the art budget is going. Buy our Cowboy Bebop overpriced crossover skins. Who cares about the lore? Who cares about progressing the story? Buy our shit. And after all the negative things I've said about this game, it's still one of my favorite games of all time. It's gonna still be in my top 25 list because the character design was on point and the enthusiasm and jubilance back when this game came out was unparalleled. I still enjoy these characters, and I still frequently go back to those original cinematics and the ones that have been released since then, the promotional material. That's so well done. The promise of an amazing story that I still would love to see more of.
I had hoped we could continue our journey together. We will meet again, Zenyatta.
Subnautica is an amazing survival crafting game, one that takes place almost entirely underwater. The visuals are incredibly stunning, not just because the environments are well designed, but also because the game is technologically impressive. It really does do a great job simulating what it would look like in the ocean. In the day, the waves shimmer as the sunlight bounces off of them, and during the night, you can see the moon and the sky reflected in the sea itself. When you dive into the shallows, you can see the artifacts of light against the seafloor. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. But we've all dived into a pool before, we've all seen what it looks like, and this game very accurately captures it. And as you dive deeper, your visibility gets limited. The color spectrum becomes smaller, as it normally would underwater. This game simply put in a lot of effort to reflect what it actually would be like to dive in real life. But continuing to talk about the visuals, there are a lot of different biomes. Not just between the shallow waters and the deeper waters, but also this alien planet has different alien creatures and plants. And different regions have different ecosystems. And those ecosystems can be different if you go down deeper and deeper. From start to finish, the game never ceases to be visually breathtaking, which is great because it is a sandbox game where the environments and exploring them is a big portion of the gameplay. The premise of the game is that you were a crew member on a giant spaceship that was traveling through space, which took some damage and ended up crashing on this largely oceanic planet. The only thing that you have that survived the impact was your escape pod, which is bare bones minimum, and I would hesitate to describe it as being intact. A lot of the systems are damaged. Luckily, the Fabricator is still in one piece. The Fabricator seems quite magical, being able to take basic rocks and wreckage you see on the seafloor and turn it into usable materials. I can make a computer chip if I have copper wire, gold, and table coral. Yeah, you know, it's just so easy to make a CPU like that. Just take a couple rocks, bang them together, and boom. So you start off not being able to dive down very far, not being able to move around very fast. You're limited in what you can explore. But you can find loose minerals. You can break apart limestone outcroppings and take the copper from the inside. You bring them back to your ship, and you can start building more gear that you can use. An oxygen tank, so you can dive down deeper, or stay down longer. Diving equipment to help you move around faster. And a habitat builder tool, so you can start building a base. Since you're going to be out here anyway, might as well live in comfort. Get yourself a nice living quarters. My first base always seems to be quite simple. A small tube with some storage areas inside, and some very minor amenities. But this is just the beginning, and as you progress, you get more equipment. You can build a vehicle to help you motor around the ocean faster. You can improve your ability to dive down deeper or stay down longer. You can craft defensive implements to help you stave off the hostile wildlife. Get out of here! Or tools that help you cut into sealed off areas, a laser cutter, for instance, to get into areas that would otherwise be off limits. All of this while finding ways to stave off hunger and thirst, and replenishing your health if you've taken too much damage. Periodically, you're also notified of emergency beacons, other possible survivors nearby, and these emergency beacons don't always yield fruit in terms of finding people, but you do find other crash sites, other settlements where people have tried to live themselves. You can sift through notes and audio recordings to learn what happened there, and also find blueprints, which helps you improve your own base. Find resources that you could use to improve your materials. Craft new gear. It's always fun to pause and take a moment to look back and see how you've progressed in the short amount of time. Initially not being able to dive down more than 100 meters, not being able to explore very far at all, and eventually you're diving down hundreds of feet and staying down there for an extended period of time because you've got the supplies. You started off having to hunt fish, which you would bring to the fabricator and cook into a meal, but then you learned to set traps which would catch the fish for you before you cooked them up. Before you set up your own greenery where you could pick fresh fruit out of a tree and not have to catch any of the wildlife at all. Your shelter has evolved too, no longer a small tube in which you crammed a bunch of gear, but now is an actual living quarters with amenities. You don't have to worry about purifying water because you built a water purifier, and you don't have to worry about powering any of this stuff because you built a nuclear reactor. It's just really fun to go from barely surviving to effortlessly thriving. And I really love setting off on an expedition, anticipating what supplies I'll need, preserved food and water for the journey, weapons for the dangers I'll face. I'll discover some coordinates off in the distance that I want to investigate, and then I set off to see what I can find. And once I've explored it thoroughly, I bring back with a stash of new materials which I can use to improve my base and continue improving my ability to survive. It's an incredibly fun gameplay loop set in an amazingly beautiful world. Beautiful and sometimes quite unwelcoming. This game is very relaxing most of the time, but it can go from 0 to 100 in an instant. Holy fuck! Get me the hell out of here! All right, we're going this way.
Is that the Reaper everyone was talking
Hey,
about? Leviathan?
that might be. I find myself returning to this game frequently, again and again, simply because it starts off so strong, and it's such a fun game to play. My only complaint is that the end game is a bit of a slog. Once you need to dive down to the deeper depths, your small, simple sea craft, maneuverable as it is not going to cut it. Enter the Cyclops, a giant ship which is incredibly cool. It is like piloting your own self-sustaining base. You can trick it out with some amenities. It's really cool, but also very large and bulky, and difficult to navigate through tight crevices. Also a bit slow if you're used to the speed of the sea moth. It doesn't go nearly as fast as I would like. It wouldn't be that bad if I could simply pilot it around on the surface, but because you are required to use this thing to dive down deep, and diving down deep requires navigating through tight, small passages, it can get very frustrating. Which is why, despite coming back to this game many times, I've only beaten the game once. But that hasn't stopped me from enjoying my time with it. I always come back to this game, marvel at its beauty, and have a blast playing around with it for a few hours. And if I ever get bored of this game, it's got a sequel game, Below Zero, which is also a pretty enjoyable time. I don't play a whole lot of survival crafting games, mostly because they're not usually that great, but Subnautica is one of the better ones. I really enjoyed the original Paper Mario for the Nintendo 64. It was a fun, cute, not too difficult role-playing game featuring the Mario characters I had grown to enjoy over the years. The game was visually charming, the story wasn't overly complex, and the battle system was a lot of fun. It's a simple turn-based system, but being able to do extra damage by hitting a key press the moment your character makes contact with the enemy. At the time, that felt quite revolutionary. Like I actually had some agency, some way to contribute to this turn-based battle aside from choosing the attacks. One of the things about this game I enjoyed the most was the badge system. You can purchase or find different badges to equip onto Mario, which would shift or enhance different aspects of his attack power. There's no right answer for what badges you should equip, just pick the ones that you think would help with your playstyle. If you know that you're going to be going up against a group of enemies that have spiky helmets on their heads, preventing you from jumping on them, you can choose to equip badges that enhance your hammer attack, or a badge that lets you jump on enemies with spiky helmets without taking damage yourself. Perhaps you've chosen to hyper-specialize your Mario, giving him all the best jump abilities, at the cost of neglecting all of his hammer abilities, which makes him great for taking out a lot of aerial foes while leaving him vulnerable to the enemies that are on the ground, or have helmets that prevent taking jump damage. If that's the case, you'll need to have a contingency plan, a partner who can cover your weaknesses, or if you're properly prepared, you can use items, like a POW block, which can hit all the enemies that are on the ground and knock most of them over, allowing your jump attacks to actually do damage to them. Again, there's just a lot of ways to approach combat. It's very flexible, and you can be as versatile as you like. Who do you want to be killed by a snowman?
What?
Do you want to die today?
Excuse me, what?
But I'm not gonna act like it's the complexities of the battle system that make Paper Mario so endearing. It's just a really fun game. It's very charming. It's got a lot of fun secrets tucked away here and there for you to find. It's simply satisfying to play. Progressing the story, leveling up Mario, finding new companions to add to your team, finding upgrades to enhance their abilities as well, finding star pieces and coins that you can use to trade for more badges to further customize your character build. There were also a lot of fun side activities you could do, participating in a quiz show, engaging in combat at the local dojo, delivering mail, and experimenting with different cooking recipes, trying to bake a nice cake or some item that might help you in combat. I really enjoyed Chapter 2, the desert level. It was a lot of fun to explore this large, open desert with secrets hidden behind what seemed to be every rock, a mysterious oasis off to the side. I don't know, I just thought it was a really cool area to explore and I love going back to it. I also really liked Chapter 4, which takes place entirely inside a toy box. and the toys that you throw in the toy box become things you can interact with in the level. Well, that was pretty cool. I also really liked Chapter 7, which takes place in a very nice wintry wonderland, and then you gotta solve a penguin's murder mystery. That was unexpected and certainly fun. Overall, it's just a fun, relaxing, enjoyable game. I enjoyed exploring every one of the levels. The battle system was a lot of fun. Sometimes the bosses actually provided a bit more of a challenge. And the game doesn't take itself too seriously. It's not afraid to poke fun at the Mario series. I played a bit of its sequel, Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door, but I never ended up beating it. I don't exactly remember why I stopped playing. I enjoyed what I did play of it, and maybe if I went back to it, I'd be able to beat it this time and enjoy it even more than the original Paper Mario. But until then, I will say that the original Paper Mario is still a lot of fun, and I like going back to it every now and then, revisiting the worlds and the levels and the characters, and just enjoying a simple, quiet, fun, easygoing Mario game. Oh my darling, how I miss you, Mario, where are you?
I'm running out of oxygen. I'm in space.
I've never been a huge fan of the Final Fantasy series, but I did have an amazing introduction to it. I received a copy of Final Fantasy VIII for my birthday one year, and I tried it out, and I was blown away by it. Possibly because previously I had only played Nintendo games, E for Everyone, mascot platformers, things that weren't all that serious. But now I've got this game where there's a gun that's also a sword, and there's this crescendoing opera music, and the protagonist is an angsty teenager, which is great for me because I was an angsty teenager at the time. It was like I was able to perfectly map myself onto the main character, which really drew me in. The first thing you do in this game is pair up with your teacher, venture to a nearby cave, which turns out to be a volcano, and then you gotta defeat this demonic devil-looking thing inside of it, and then you go back to school and you have prom and you meet this cute love interest, and she's super into you, but you're not having any of that because girls are dumb and school is dumb. Back in the day, I had a great time with this game, but I'm not so blinded by nostalgia that I can't see its flaws. It's got a lot of flaws. But that was my introduction to this series, and I wanted to play more Final Fantasy games. So I tried the Super Nintendo Final Fantasy games, and they were great. I had a great time with 4, 5, and 6. But 6 is still the Final Fantasy game that has stuck with me over the years, and is still to this day my favorite. I enjoyed the wide cast of characters you could add to your party, and how emotive they were, even through simple sprites. My favorite character is King Edgar, who joins your party early on. He can use a variety of tools, including a crossbow to shoot all the enemies at once. Then I give him a chainsaw, and he just has a blast. He's going crazy. Sometimes he's wearing a Freddy Krueger mask while he's chopping up his victims, and I don't know where he got that. I did not give that to him. That is not his standard issue equipment. The story is very mature. It doesn't talk down to the player at all. It's telling an actual human story, accompanied by some very tender and touching music. One of the running themes throughout the entire game is this feeling of loss. Everyone in the game has lost something important to them. They're all in the middle of a war, the Empire is starting to annex different territories and is really pushing people around, and it's tearing families apart, it's destroying kingdoms, people are suffering and being subjugated, and no one is having a good time. But the characters continue to fight, they never give up. From the man who lost his entire family to this raging war, to a general who was infused with magic at a young age, to become a tool of war for the Empire. And the two brothers from Figaro Castle, who lost their father and then had to make some difficult decisions on their own futures. And this guy right here, who is just so pissed at the Empire because they destroyed his blimp. Oh, he is mad. I feel like this theme of loss really resonated with me when I played through this game as I was younger. Back then, my parents were going through a divorce, and I felt a huge sense of loss from that as well. So Final Fantasy VI not only provided me a different world to escape to, but also seemed to commiserate in misery with me. Overall, the entire thing is great. It's got great music, great characters, a really good, well-told story, I went back to this game recently because they released a pixel remaster of it not too long ago, and it really, really improves the presentation. It was already good back on the Super Nintendo, but it looks so good now. The 16-bit music tracks are all replaced with grand orchestral scores, the sprite work has been touched up, the entire thing just looks amazing. They also added quite a lot of quality of life improvements. The ability to turn off random battles immediately jumps to the forefront. Now, I've never been a huge fan of the random encounter system. I find it incredibly annoying to constantly be interrupted by a 1-minute chore that I have to complete before I can continue my quest. You're just trying to go from point A to point B, and it should be a 2-minute walk, but it becomes a 30-minute slog because you keep getting a bunch of random battles popping up in your face. I've never been a big fan of them. Never liked them. Never. Back when I played on the Super Nintendo, I would abuse an exploit. My characters would ride a raft around the river rapids all night, and when I woke up in the morning, they were level 50. So I started off being way overpowered and just kind of blew my way through the game, and you know, that was enjoyable for me. And now here it is, basically an official option. Turn off random battles entirely. Or if you'd prefer to play through the game the way it was meant to be played, that's also an option, and while you're doing that, you can fill out the new bestiary. Random encounters aside, I think this game is wonderful. It's one of my favorites from my childhood. Going back to it in this new remade version, it looks and sounds wonderful, and it's definitely the version I would recommend for anyone who's interested in playing it, either as a newcomer or a returning veteran. There's one more aspect of this game that I want to talk about, but it's gonna be considered a spoiler. So the game starts off feeling pretty normal for an RPG, albeit telling a bit of a darker and more mature story. You travel the world, visiting all these cities, meeting these new people, adding them to your party, kitting them out in powerful gear and equipment. It's building up to this big final battle with the main antagonists. You fly your airship up to their evil base in the sky, you fight them, and you lose. The bad guys win, and they end up destroying the world. So all those cities you visited previously are now ruined. The fertile grasslands you used to fight monsters in, that's all been turned to dust and desert. Parents have lost their children. Orphans are begging for help. Incredibly powerful monsters roam the land, making people flee and hide in terror. You thought the game was over, but nope, surprise, there's a second half of this game, and it's a post-apocalyptic, open-world RPG. Why do I like it so much? This is an amazing revelation. The first half of the game was quite linear. You were going from plot point to plot point, going where the story needed you to go, and now you have an entirely new game to explore. So yeah, I enjoy a lot of what this game does. And I want to recommend it to as many people as possible, but I know that not everyone's gonna vibe well with it. It's not for everyone, but I enjoyed it at the time, I still enjoy it today. Some of that's nostalgia, but some of that is just a fond appreciation for what is a finely crafted game. Without a doubt, my favorite survival crafting game ever has got to be The Long Dark. I have put so many hours into this Canadian wilderness. It's so easy to become immersed in this artistically beautiful world that is hauntingly vacant. There's nobody else here to help you. They have all since left or died. It's just you trying to survive on this one Canadian island. Well, you and a variety of animals that have become somewhat more aggressive as of late.
Okay. Oh! Oh! Oh God! Oh God! No! 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 Ah!
Your only goal is to survive, and to do that, you will need to find clean drinking water, edible food, shelter from the harsh elements, clothing to keep you warm, and weapons to protect yourself from the hostile wildlife. It is such a contrast from other games that I play, where the mere act of moving from one side of the map to the other can be quite the expedition. The unpredictable nature of the world that I'm in means I might come face to face with a threat I may not have anticipated. A bear, a wolf, or perhaps some unfortunate weather, a snowstorm, or some really chilling cold. It's a game that ultimately tests your ability to plan and adapt to unforeseen circumstances. How do you want to spend your day? And how will your plans change if the weather goes bad, or you start running low on a vital resource, or if you find yourself in the fangs of an animal and now suddenly you need medical attention? But I don't think most people see it as a strategy or resource management game. It's just a great game to exist in. Yeah, your primary needs are a concern and you have to balance your resources, but they exist mostly as a motivator to keep you moving. Keep exploring this giant world. See what's just around the next snowbank or over the next hill. I distinctly remember one time I was doing a challenge mode, trying to survive along the coastal highway, and I was having a difficult time finding the resources that I needed, so I ventured a bit beyond my usual path and stumbled upon an entirely new region of the map with an amazing physical structure that I couldn't wait to explore. It was so amazing from the outside, and when I got in, there was no shortage of rooms for me to explore, things to find. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so endeared to this game. It reminds me so very much of my time with Fallout 3, a game that was equally bleak, but also equally beautiful in its own quiet way. Littered with broken buildings and ancient ruins, which were all filled to the brim with a rich history, supplies you could use, of course, things you could find to upgrade your ability to survive, but also environmental storytelling, notes that you can stumble upon that sometimes talk about someone's attempts to survive, their struggles, or maybe a handy recipe or a piece of advice. It's a very mellow game that has a lot of secrets in it for you to find. I'm reminded of the time that I spent at the Desolate Lighthouse. This is a region of the map that's relatively small, and I made it a challenge of my own to survive there as long as I could, to at least spend 100 days in this relatively small region of the map to see if that was possible. And indeed it was possible, but while I spent so much time there, I learned a lot about the region. Around day 60, I met a new animal that I had no idea would even show up in this area. And around day 80, as I was going back through an area of the region I had passed plenty of times, I noticed that there was an entire cave system that I just had never seen before. It was right there. It was a stone's throw away from my base, and I had never noticed. But staying in a single region and exploring it with a fine-tooth comb is not the only way to play this game. It's a very big world, with a lot of regions and a lot of areas to check out. And there have been plenty of close calls, moments where I came close to the brink of death. Sometimes because of bad planning, or, let's be honest, it's almost always because of bad planning. I could say I got unlucky, but part of planning properly is accounting for the possibility of bad luck. And you learn over time. You learn not to set off on dangerous expeditions without having a plan B. And sometimes I'm able to cheat death even though I deserve it, because I found one errant can of soda that would keep me going, give me enough hydration or a little bit extra energy to keep me going until I found the proper shelter. Or perhaps I was able to find a pack of matches which would let me start a fire to stave off hypothermia after I accidentally fell into the river and got all my clothes wet. Or maybe I plan a short day trip to a nearby location, only to find myself trapped at that location for an extended period of time because a blizzard has rolled in.
Oh, good! I just want to throw myself off the cliff right now. This is dumb.
Ultimately being saved by a tin of sardines, a small amount of food that would help stave off hunger for just a little bit longer. Pass the time by eating sardines.
Yeah, let's eat these sardines. Ooh, delicious. Let's drink some...
Breakfast of champions.
Sardines and orange soda. Breakfast of champions.
But there's so much to do in this game, so many fun things to find. You can find hunting rifles or pistols for taking down animals, and then you can eat them or skin them and turn their hides into warm clothing. You can tear down the curtains inside of an abandoned building and use it to repair your clothing. You can walk along the shoreline of the ocean looking for some materials that may have washed ashore. And if you're patient enough, you might even see the Aurora Borealis. This game can be very exciting at times, but I would say that most of the time, it's just a rather mundane and relaxing game. Something that I like to play on one monitor while listening to a podcast or watching a cartoon on the other monitor. In fact, that is what I have done in the past. Sometimes I've just played The Long Dark for hours and hours while binging through a podcast that I was interested in. I've done that. So yeah, there's not much else I can say about the game. It's just really, really good at what it does. And what it does isn't going to be for everyone, but it was for me. I had a great time with this game, and I still do go back to it occasionally. It's still getting updates, even now in 2024. There are still plenty of regions in this game that I have not yet explored, some because they don't seem like they'd be fun to explore for me, and others that probably would be fun, I just haven't gotten around to them because honestly, the game is very sizable. It's a world space they've been building for years, and if you haven't tried it before, I definitely recommend checking it out to see if it's for you. I remember picking up Metal Gear Solid 2 on a whim on one of my visits to the video game store. I had heard of the series previously and seen some of my friends playing it, but never really got into it myself. But I was in the mood to try new things, and I had heard great things about this game, and I gave it a spin. And to this day, it is still my favorite of the Metal Gear Solid games. Back in the day, that was more of a minority opinion. Metal Gear Solid 1 had the lasting cultural impact, and Metal Gear Solid 3 was widely perceived to be a phenomenal game. I learned that Metal Gear Solid 2 was a bit maligned because the marketing material was a bit misrepresentative. A lot of people didn't like the new protagonist, Raiden, but I tell you, I loved playing Metal Gear Solid 2. And this was in spite of me not being very experienced or very good with stealth games in general. But the atmosphere, the music, the visuals just look so good. It was a solid 60 frames per second from start to finish, which definitely made it stand out amongst other games that didn't play quite so smoothly. The controls were crisp and responsive. It definitely felt like the character was instantly responding to my inputs. If I got spotted, or if I lost a gunfight, it certainly felt like it was my fault and not something I could blame on the game because of just how responsive it felt. I enjoyed all the characters, your communication team talking to you over the radio, giving you advice on what to do and where to go. The team of enemies, eccentric as they are, and boy howdy are they eccentric. But you know me, the wackier the better, I can't get enough of silliness. So an enemy team comprised of a terrorist on roller skates dropping bombs as he skates around, Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man, and a literal vampire, that's going to catch my eye. I'm not going to forget that anytime soon. The premise is simple enough. Infiltrate the Big Shell, this structure in the ocean that has been taken over by terrorists, and rescue the president and the hostages. But over time, you learn that there's more to this scenario than meets the eye. A lot more. Things that you weren't briefed about, and things that your mission briefers didn't know themselves. The story is incredibly complex, which is sometimes to its detriment. The game feels like it starts off grounded in reality, but then becomes a fever dream. Again, you end up fighting a vampire and a terrorist on roller skates. And you're trying to take down a fighter jet while the fighter jet is shooting at you. And it feels like the designers said, in the previous game, we had the player fight one Metal Gear. How do we top that in the sequel? Oh, I know, we'll have them fight 25 Metal Gears. And they'll tag team him. Oh, that'll be a challenge. But even though the game can be silly, crazy, off the walls, there are also moments of grounded reality, times where the story can take a more serious tone, and some actual heartbreaking moments. In many ways, this game was ahead of its time. Even one of its ultimate messages was very foretelling, talking about the problems of a digitized society, where every rumor is perfectly preserved and aggregated in this mass of information that inundates the population and dilutes and distorts what reality really is. This game really runs the gambit. There are silly, funny, laughy moments, and there are some really amazing, fun, cool moments. There's a lot of powerful imagery in this game, and characters that I quote frequently. Their words have stuck with me all these years later. And once I had gotten through the main campaign, there was still so much more game to enjoy, because I had purchased the Substance version of the game, which came with a bunch of additional stuff to do. There were hundreds, literally hundreds of VR missions that I played over and over to get better and better and get the high scores on so many of the missions. There was the assortment of Snaketail missions, which felt a bit like fan fiction that actually had gameplay backing it. and gave me a reason to go back to old levels and play them with a fresh coat of paint. You could replay cutscenes that you had seen previously, but swap out the character models. Which is crazy. I don't know of any other game that does this. It is just good fun. And then there's the skateboarding minigame. Basically 2 levels of a fully fledged skateboarding game packaged in with this game, and you can skate around the area you've been sneaking. The environment of the game becomes a skate park. That is ridiculous. I enjoyed playing this game so much that I kept on going back to it, and I got really, really good at it, probably way too good. I spent so much time in the VR missions, going for the highest score. I would play through the main campaign over and over on harder and harder difficulty settings, and I could not have known going into it just how much I would enjoy the game, but it really hooked me because it was so badass. The stealth felt good. The combat, when combat was the only option, felt good. At the time, I had a blast. Though I'm not sure it's the kind of game I can recommend to new players. The fixed camera angle is kind of a relic of its time. I think a lot of people might struggle with not having a camera they can manipulate easily. Something else I should mention. Coming back to this game many years later, I had forgotten just how much dialogue is in this game. You sit down, you hit the start button, and there's 10 minutes of cutscene, followed by 10 minutes of codec radio calls, and then you finally get control of your character, but then you're interrupted by another codec call, but then you get control again. So you go 5 feet, but then you're interrupted by another codec call, and then there's a cutscene that plays, so you get another codec call discussing what you saw in the cutscene, and then you start playing again, but then there's another codec call. It goes on like that. If you sit down and try to play this game for 2 hours, you might actually be in control of your character for maybe a quarter of that time, because there is a lot of radio conversations and cutscenes to watch and listen to. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the cutscenes are entertaining and the radio conversation calls are also mildly interesting. They're at least well voice acted. And if you get bored, you can start skipping through them, of course. But it is kind of funny just how incessant the game is. The game loves to hear itself talk, and that's not going to be for everybody. But that didn't matter to me. Metal Gear Solid 2 is still one of my favorite games of all time, one of my most played games of all time, and one of the coolest video games I've ever played. Is that the one I'm looking for? No. Are they actually, is the one I'm looking for even in the lockers, or is it like on the ceiling? What's going on? Yes, okay, got it, found it. Now it's my turn to hide and you gotta find me.
You know what you're doing.
God Hand was one of those games that I picked up on a whim. I saw it at the video game store. It was a brand new game, but it was also not fully priced. I had no idea what to make of it just by looking at the cover, but I was willing to try new things, so I bought it. And I took it home and played it, and it is amazing. I absolutely adore how off the walls this game is. I'm not sure words could fully do it justice. You'd have to see it to believe it.
The demon is really doing some damage to me, but he can't stand up to my ultimate technique. Kick you in the dick! Ow, ow. Nope, this is bad. This is very bad. How do you like me now? Get out of here!
Punching demons, going toe-to-toe with a gorilla, and then a clown, and then robot women, and then the Power Rangers.
Together we are the Magnetic Power!
All while an amazing surf rock soundtrack plays throughout the entire thing. And as you progress, your abilities get stronger and more outlandish as well. Your empowered, literal God Hand, being able to defeat all opponents you come across. The roulette wheel, which gives you access to crazy off-the-wall attacks, as if your basic attacks weren't crazy enough already. This was a phenomenal game, and I kept going back to it over and over again, trying out new move combinations because there are over 100 unlockable moves that you could combo together, trying out new strategies, trying to get to the higher difficulty settings. Sometimes I would go back to specific fights and chapters simply because I loved the music that played, or I thought the fights themselves were a lot of fun. It was a hack and slash game, but without any hacking and slashing. It was fists and more fists, and sometimes your foot with kicks. I don't know if I've ever played a game that was more simultaneously frantic and insane. It was a delight.
Making me break out my ultimate technique. Here we go. Whoa, yeah! It's ineffective. I don't know what I've done wrong.
Unfortunately, not everyone shared my opinion on the game. It got some middling reviews, and it ultimately was the last game that the company made before it collapsed. Which really sucks, because I would have loved a sequel to this game. I revisit this game frequently. I enjoy it so much. Although it is showing its age a little bit. There's a lot of button mashing, and that can be kind of rough on my hands. I'm enjoying this while I can because I know that eventually I will grow too old. My ancient arthritic hands won't be able to enjoy it anymore. But I'll always have the memories. Memories of being turned into a chihuahua by an evil magical lady. Or finding an RPG on the ground, picking it up, and instead of firing the RPG at my enemies, I use the RPG launcher to beat them to death. It is an endless volley of absurdity. One of the first boss fights is a duo of eccentric, effeminate wrestling aficionados that will slam you and ram their butts into you and throw you across the room and charge into you. And did I mention the gorilla? I think I did, but it bears repeating. There is a gorilla you fight. More than once. He comes back. The people that worked on this game moved on to other projects, and I would say that Bayonetta is far more widely known. I think a lot of people know about Bayonetta. But before we had Bayonetta, we had God Hand. And God Hand is really an underrated gem. A game that reminds us all that video games are supposed to be fun.
Get ready, cause I'm really gonna give it to you! Hey, you're the big nice hero, right? How about giving me a hand here?
Huh?
Come on, come on, come on!
Oh, I'll help you out all right.
¡A la mierda!
Excuse me, what?
Looking at the enemy.
Excuse me, what is this?
So yeah, that's Giant Head. The boss's name is Giant Head.
Slay the Spire. It's a card battling game that, when I started playing it, I didn't think it would grab me the way it did. It wasn't the first roguelike card battler game I had played. I started off with Inscrpytion, that was my first, and I had a really great time with that game, and it made me want to seek out other games like it. And I had heard that this game had taken a lot of inspiration from Slay the Spire, as a lot of games have, so I decided to check that one out. And it seemed to be quite the difficult game, the goal being to get to the top of the spire, and I just couldn't get up there. And it was very frustrating, and I told myself, the moment I get to the top floor and defeat the final boss, I'm done playing this game because it is so frustrating and I don't want to play it anymore. And eventually, I did get to the top floor, and I did beat the final boss. But there are other characters in the game, so maybe I could get to the top floor with those characters. And eventually I did that as well. And at this point, I'm starting to get better at the game, so I think maybe I can beat it on a slightly harder difficulty setting?
I die with honor. Except
the Family Guy death pose.
And with enough tries, yeah, I was able to do it. But there's even harder difficulty settings, or maybe some fun modifiers so I could do a few more runs with those. So I do a few runs with those, and before I knew it, it's one of my most played games of all time. It was Insidious! I think one of the reasons I like it so much is because I can't play Civilization 5 as much these days. A single playthrough of that game can take 10, 12 hours, but a single run of Slay the Spire? Well, that's half an hour to an hour. If I've got some spare time, there's not a lot of commitment. I can do an attempt. On your way to the top of the spire, you will be confronted by a lot of difficult enemies, and you'll be able to attack them hopefully and defeat them quickly before they become even more of a problem. But the cards that you draw are random, and they might not always be the cards that you need. You might draw some block cards, which can defend against incoming damage, or draw some powerful attacks that will allow you to dispatch your enemies before they can get their attacks off. Perhaps your cards have some status effects. You can weaken them, make their attacks do less damage, or make them more susceptible to your attacks. You can poison them, or alternatively, buff yourself. Make yourself invulnerable for a few turns. There's a lot of strategies out there to consider, and a lot of cards that you can add to your deck that can strengthen it over time. And that's where most of the strategy in this game comes from, because you don't have control over what cards you draw on most of the turns, but you can control what cards are in your deck. And at the end of every battle, you can add one more random card if you so choose. Some of them could be very good in the short term, and their usefulness can wear off over time. Or alternatively, there might be a very, very strong card on offer, but you won't be able to take it because you need to deal with the more immediate threats. Sometimes the choice of card you add can be very difficult indeed, and sometimes you're just trying to pick the least bad option. There's some life advice for you in there. Sometimes you've got no choice but to pick the least bad option. And considering that it's a rather mundane card game, it can be quite thrilling and exciting. If a rare relic drops that you know you can use, then suddenly your ascent to the top might become significantly easier. And Akabeko.
Why do you get a mini pig? Oh, I like the mini pig.
Or so you think, until you're halfway up and realize that you were overconfident, your deck has one big weakness you haven't accounted for, and once confronted with it, your deck falls apart and you've got to try again. But that's okay, because failure is just an opportunity to learn. And boy, I have learned a lot. I've probably tried to get to the top of the Spire at least 2,000 times, and maybe I've made it 50, 100. Most of my runs do not end in massive success, but I do learn a little bit more each time. And every time I see one of these experienced Slay the Spire players, the streamers or the people that put a lot of time into it, they make it seem so easy. So I jump back into it and remember that it's not quite so easy for me. This is a game that's really easy to play, really easy to learn, but really, really difficult to master. So there's always reason to go back and get better at it. And it's also, like a lot of games that I love, highly moddable. There are lots of fan-made mods, including the Downfall mod, which is oh so substantive. It is so much content. It allows you to play the game in new and interesting ways with even more characters and fun mechanics. And that's not the only one. There are plenty of other mods out there that are less popular. People just really like this game, and they keep on making more stuff to play around with. And I'm having a blast. Sweeping Beam. And the strong winds blew him away. It's always going to be one of those games that I have installed just because occasionally I'll get the itch to play a round or two. It won't always go smoothly for me. There will be plenty of runs in which I struggle and ultimately fail. But maybe I'll find a fun new combination of cards and relics. Maybe I'll stumble upon a strategy I hadn't considered before. But yes, Slay the Spire, an addictive, fun strategy game, the roguelike card battler I keep coming back to again and again and again. Oh no, it's a lady who summons a lot of daggers.
It's Lady Gaga in her meat suit. What the hell?
Oh, there she goes. I had been a big fan of strategy games for a long time, but I wasn't really into the roguelikes or roguelites. The deck-building card battler genre I had never heard of before, but I saw some of the promotional material for a game called Inscrpytion, and it intrigued me. The spooky aesthetic was very enticing, and the notion of being trapped in this cabin in the middle of the woods with a creepy and obscure opponent who simply wants to play a game with you. It was certainly a curiosity that drew me in. The game eases you into it very slowly, teaching you the mechanics one at a time, letting you get through the game at your own pace. I played for 20 minutes, lost, had to go all the way back to square one and start again, but this time with a bit more knowledge of how the game's mechanics worked. One of the coolest things about this game is the ability to alter your cards, change them, rip them apart, or cram two of them together to make a new strange card. It's really fun to discover new synergies, taking two cards that are individually very weak, but combining them to become unbelievably broken. There are lots of ways to create imbalanced, overpowered cards, and that's something that the game encourages by having the antagonist himself be a cheating bastard. He's pulling out all the stops, trying to do everything he can to sabotage you. Well, two can play that game. And then you beat him at his own game. You get to the end of his challenge, but then you gotta start over again at square one. Because beating the game is not beating the game. That style of deception is very frequent. Nothing is quite what it seems. Sometimes you'll play a card and it'll look a little different than you remember, and you're wondering, why is this the case? And when you finally escape from the cabin, when you finally find the exit, you learn that this game is kind of 3 different games stitched together. And they all have a very different aesthetic, and they play somewhat differently. It's a bit of a bold choice because while most people do enjoy the first act, not everyone is going to like the second or third act. You really can't beat the first act. The first act is the best, so I would definitely encourage people to check it out, and if they really enjoyed the first act of the game, maybe consider playing the rest of the game. But even if you only played the first act is still really strong. So strong, in fact, that there's an additional mode in the game that allows you to play this first act over and over in more of an actual, repeatable roguelike challenge mode. And I put a lot of time into this. I had a lot of fun with it. It's got a lot of challenges, new mechanics, new cards, and a new final boss. It's just a lot of fun. That's what Inscrpytion is for me. It's just a lot of fun. Sometimes I get a little pissed, because again, the opponent you're going up against is an actual asshole and he likes to throw garbage at you, and sometimes it just feels really unfair. But being able to turn the tables on him by throwing your own unfair cards at him, that's satisfying. That is cathartic. And of course, like so many games I enjoy, it is also very moddable. People are making their own cards. Some of them fit very well into the aesthetic of the game. Some of them are jokey. Some of them are just references to other games.
Prepare to get punched in your face!
And some of the modders have invented entirely new game modes. Building off of a 2-minute teaser in the main campaign, they turn that into an actual fleshed out game mode. And that's really awesome. I just can't get enough of this game. The humming song that plays when you're going up against the trapper opponent. The way the cards berate you if they don't think you're playing well enough. Those times when your opponent thinks that they've got the upper hand, and you draw that one card you made that's got an attack power of 25. And then you hit him so hard that not only do you win that hand, he has to give you a handful of teeth, which he uses as currency. Why do you have so many teeth, strange man? Why do you have so many teeth in this cabin in the woods? Even after beating the entire campaign and going through the entirety of that challenge mode, Casey's Mod, and modding the game to high heck and back, I still find myself being drawn back in. Not constantly, it doesn't feel so severe that it's an addiction, but I just love coming back and playing this game again because it was designed very well and I had a lot of fun with it. I've always been a really big fan of rhythm games. Games where you're hitting the button on the beat of the music to make success happen. I was there when Guitar Hero exploded in popularity. I got myself a plastic guitar and I played the heck out of that first game. And then I got the second game and the third game and I enjoyed the entire Guitar Hero series. But I would say that my favorite rhythm game of all time would have to be Pump It Up. Many people haven't heard of this series before, but they have heard of a similar game, Dance Dance Revolution. It was a Japanese arcade game where you dance on the indicated tiles on the beat of the music. But Pump It Up was a rival dancing franchise, more Korean than Japanese, and with 5 tiles to dance on instead of 4. Growing up, the arcade near me had both those machines, but I really enjoyed Pump It Up so much more. The music felt more intense and fast-paced, and I suppose I just really had a preference for the songs on that machine. I also really enjoyed the dance pad a lot more. That 5th tile in the center added a lot more flexibility. I have so many fond memories of playing this game. Every Wednesday, my friend and I would head down to the arcade and play nothing but Pump It Up for over an hour. We would take turns picking our favorite songs or trying some new songs. And as we got better at the game, one of us would feel emboldened to raise the difficulty, which challenged the other one to do the same. I still remember how much difficulty we had struggling to dance along with this Beethoven song, a very intense Beethoven song, and we just couldn't get the dance moves right. We couldn't figure it out. But we kept trying, and eventually something clicked. One of us figured out how to do it, the other one of us picked it up quickly as well, and it became one of our staples, one of the songs we would go back to and dance at least once a night. It was so fun. But eventually the arcade shut down and we lost our Pump It Up machine. But we enjoyed it too much to let it go so easily. Luckily, there was a home version of Pump It Up for the PlayStation 2, which I had. It was also available for the Xbox that he had, so we each got ourselves a copy of Pump It Up for our home console. It came in a much bigger box, of course. You can't fit an entire dance pad into a CD case. But I played the home version of this game so much. I would spend entire nights just dancing on this dance pad. It made for good exercise. But that's not how I saw it at the time. It was just me enjoying a very physically intense video game. I would get better and better at the songs, which would unlock more songs and secret songs. And while I long for the days where my friend and I could dance side by side on these Pump It Up machines, I'll always have the memories. And I will always wish that the course of history could have gone differently, where arcade machines could have maintained their popularity. I long for a world in which all major malls across America have arcade games in them and they are overflowing with popularity, where shooter games and skee-ball and crane games never fell out of popularity. And there's always a Pump It Up machine for my friend and I to enjoy again. There are some people out there that buy pinball machines or arcade games to store at their own house, and I don't really have room for that. But if I did, and I had the extra money lying around, I would buy a Pump It Up machine. That would be my arcade game of choice. I would love to have a Pump It Up machine in my house. So many of my other favorite games I can very easily revisit because they're being ported or remastered or remade, or maybe the original is still very accessible. But Pump It Up is perhaps my favorite game that I cannot easily play right now. It's just too much of an ask. It's too much out of reach. But I would if I could. I would definitely love to play more Pump It Up. It may be an unorthodox choice, and maybe I am a bit blinded by nostalgia, but I absolutely do enjoy myself a good rhythm game, and Pump It Up is still my favorite. I can still hear some of those tunes playing in my head all these years later. Resident Evil 4 is widely considered to be one of the best games of all time. A lot of people really enjoyed this game when it came out, and it has still held up over the years, taking the classic Resident Evil formula and infusing into it a lot more action and combat. There are moments in the game that are wacky or absurd, and sometimes the dialogue that the characters are speaking sounds like it's ripped directly from a B-grade movie. It was silly, good fun. I enjoyed the heck out of this game on the GameCube, and when it came out for PlayStation 2, I bought it for my PlayStation 2, and then I played it even more. So when a sequel to Resident Evil 4 was announced, you better believe I was all eager to play that. How are they going to follow up on this incredibly successful video game? And the answer basically was, make Resident Evil 4 again, but this time add co-op. And honestly, that's all I needed. I had an absolute blast with this game. Resident Evil 5 is my favorite Resident Evil game. And that might be surprising for a few people, because in a lot of people's eyes, Resident Evil 5 failed to live up to expectations. Any semblance of it being a survival horror was thrown out the window. Resident Evil 5 is more of a survival action game than a survival horror game, and for a lot of people, that's disappointing. But to me, Resident Evil 5 is just Resident Evil 4, a game I really enjoyed, but multiplayer. I could enjoy it and share it with a friend. And you really do have to play this game with a friend to get the most out of it. Yes, you can play with a computer-controlled AI companion, but it's significantly worse. Going back to this game years later and trying to play it solo, I think I fully understand why people didn't like this game as much when it came out. You really have to play it with a friend to get the full experience.
Hey, oh boy! oh great, no, I'm so happy you're doing this to me, thank you. So, this is what happens when you let women drive your airboat. Wow!
There were a lot more wacky melee kills, not just the kicks to the head and suplexes, but also uppercutting them, snapping their neck, stomping on them while they're on the ground, and the combo melees, where you punch an enemy towards your friend, they kick them back to you, and then you do this ultimate wrestling finishing move on them, and they explode in a spectacular fashion. I can't get enough of that. And if the melee kills weren't silly enough, They also bring back Wesker as the main villain, and this guy has just been absurdly over the top since his introduction all those years ago. He is by far my favorite Resident Evil villain. He's so cheesy, over the top. He saw The Matrix once, and now it's inspired his entire personality. He thinks he's got some intimidating dialogue, but it's so cheesy I can't help but laugh every time he opens his mouth.
The right to be a god. Only one truly capable of being a god deserves that right.
There are moments in this game that are incredibly absurd. It's an over-the-top action Hollywood movie that you play with a friend. You can each choose a weapon loadout that you prefer, and if you find ammo that you're not using, you can trade it with your friend. And if they find ammo that they're not using, they can trade it to you. Okay.
What are you doing with that rocket launcher? Oh, you're not. It's not actually equipped. Okay.
No, I'm. Here.
Oh, god damn it!
There are so many video games out there that people love to play, and they think, I wish I could share this game I enjoy so much with a friend. And sometimes these companies try to make that game a reality, but they fall short. But not Resident Evil 5. It is Resident Evil 4, but with a friend. It knows what it wants to be, and it excels at it. And once the game is over, you unlock the Mercenaries battle mode. And I loved going back to this mode over and over and over again. My friend and I played this game mode to death. We enjoyed it so much that we got the highest rank with every character on every map. And we kept on going back to it, trying to beat our score, trying to map out the most efficient route, and killing enemies in the most over-the-top ways possible to earn the highest scores. Unlocking new playable characters for this mode, including Wesker, whose moveset is even more over the top, and bringing back characters from previous Resident Evil games. This is why Resident Evil 5 has stuck with me over the years and why I still love it so much. It might have lost its survival horror roots, but it is such a joy to play. It is hilarious and laughably bad and laughably good and everything in between, really. It is fun, it is wacky, it is silly, it can be intense, and every time I play it with a friend, I know I'm in for a good time.
And like, this one is supposed to be on me.
Right. Sheva, help me! Sheva! Okay, don't help me, I guess.
Melee vest didn't work out so well for you, did it?
I think this game was designed with people that wanted to save each other's lives in mind.
Yeah, it wasn't designed for people that are just like, oh, I'll watch this.
The Fallout series and I have a bit of a tumultuous relationship. When I picked up Fallout 3 back in the day, after hearing good things about it, I was looking forward to it. But I didn't get very far. I just didn't understand what kind of game it was. I didn't understand how it was supposed to be played. Once I got out of that tutorial vault and I was released into this giant open world with almost no guidance, I didn't really understand my objective. I didn't realize the fun was supposed to be derived from exploring. I guess I just hadn't had a game give me this much freedom before. I got confused and I didn't really understand what I needed to do to make progress. Find my dad? I don't know where he is. I wandered around the map, got killed by raiders, got upset, and decided not to play anymore because I didn't understand my objective. It wasn't until I came back to the game 2 years later, when I was in my trophy hunting phase, just trying to get easy trophies to pad out my stat card, that I finally went back and started playing more of the game and started to comprehend how to play it. In the end, I regard it as a pretty good game, not one I go back to frequently, but one I've got a fond memory of. A few years later, I picked up Fallout New Vegas, and that game blew me away. Slowly over time. Not at first, of course. You jump into the game, and it seems like a dry, drab desert. It's not all that exciting, but the more you play, the more you realize there's a lot of effort put into this. Compared to Fallout 3, the companions were much more interesting, had more things to say, and I wanted to spend more time with them. The reputation system was so much better than the karma system. I am not a fan of binary karma systems, and Fallout New Vegas' system was so much better. Quests had multiple ways to resolve them, and there were multiple ways to end the game, different factions you could align with. I really enjoyed that game so much that the expectations for the series got set so very high. So when Fallout 4 was announced, you better believe I pounced immediately. I got that game. I pre-ordered that game, which is not a thing I normally do, but I knew I was going to have a great time with Fallout 4 because I had such a great time with New Vegas. And then I started playing Fallout 4, and it made a great first impression. The graphics were great, the controls were great, they improved combat.
Don't worry, I'll take care of those raiders for you. By the way, there is a mutant hound in the background, and it's about to come and attack us, so we should probably get out of this dialogue.
But as I played through the game hour after hour, I started feeling worse and worse. I think the first stick in my eye came in the form of Preston Garvey. He kept giving me quests, and I kept doing those quests, and they were all very bad quests. But I kept doing them because I wanted to complete his quest line, and hours later I still wasn't done, and I finally realized these are repeatable Radiant quests. These bad quests aren't actually amounting to anything. He's just giving me stuff to do. Fluff, filler, garbage. So even though I say it made a good first impression, an hour later it had left a sour taste in my mouth. But I figured once I got away from the starting area, surely then the world would open up, I'd have more role-playing experiences. But everywhere I went, whenever I got a quest, it was usually very mundane, very linear. Go retrieve an item, or go kill a group of people. There's no secondary way to resolve this quest, there's no way to do it without killing anybody. The quest design was just so much worse. It didn't feel like the story was being tailored to my character based on the stats I'd given them. It didn't feel like it was improving on the formula, or even continuing the formula that was successful with New Vegas. It felt like a step backwards. But I trudged on. I forced myself to keep going forward because I was so hopeful that I'd be able to find good parts in Fallout 4. Surely the quest design would improve. Surely things would get better as I progressed. There's got to be better quests somewhere in the game. I just got to find them, right? But not really, no. And the main quest was very ham-fisted, very linear, and I really didn't care about finding Sean, which is what my primary objective. I was very frustrated that I was forced to kill Kellogg. There was no way to talk him down, no pacifist option. Again, Fallout New Vegas had set such a high bar by making every character in the game killable, but also you didn't need to kill anybody to beat the game. You could be a complete sociopath, or you could be a complete pacifist. And Fallout 4 is the exact opposite. You have to do it in the one specific way that has been ordained. It was such a disappointment for me. I set the game aside, the DLC came out, I didn't even play it. I still to this day have yet to play either Far Harbor or Nuka World. But what actually changed my mind about the game was the new survival mode. A while after the game's release, they came out with a survival mode, and eventually I decided to give that a try to see what it was like. And I had a much better time with the game as a result. Even though Fallout 4 makes for a pretty lackluster role-playing game in my eyes, it made for a pretty good post-apocalyptic open-world survival game. I liked setting up my base and then planning expeditions to go out and return. The game's a lot more intense when those 6 bullets that I find in a random toolbox can make the difference between whether or not I'm gonna get injured in a firefight or not.
Alright, I've got a couple bullets left in this pistol. Maybe I'll be able to take out this tank bot and friends. Probably not.
I remember that sometimes I had to change my strategy on the fly. Based on the resources I had and the resources I needed, maybe I wouldn't go on the expedition I had planned, or maybe I would try to run from a firefight instead of trying to win it. So coming back to Fallout 4, I had a much better time, because I had a different mindset and I had a different expectation for what the game could give me. And these days, my opinion on Fallout 4 has certainly softened. Especially because years later, my friend Zach and I have come back to this game, and we've had a great time.
Can you do me a favor?
What up?
Can you just yell backblast area clear before you shoot that?
Probably not, I'll forget.
Okay.
we can enjoy Fallout 4 for what it does right, and we can have a laugh at all the things it gets wrong. The laughably linear and honestly poorly written story, the memorable and meme-worthy characters. This game is buggy and glitchy, and sometimes that is incredibly frustrating, but other times it makes for a laugh riot.
Oh, look at there!
You know what else we need? To kill his bear, darling.
Whoa! Some bear over the rainbow!
And it's been amazing to see what mods the community can come up with. We have had a lot of fun with a variety of mods over the years, including most recently Fallout London, which is shaping up to be perhaps the best mod the Fallout series has ever seen, at least in terms of a brand new adventure for everyone to enjoy. To this day, I'm still a bit disappointed at what Fallout 4 fails to do. I can see how much potential is there, and it's a bit sad to know that that potential just wasn't realized. But even though Fallout 4 doesn't meet my expectations for what I'd like from a Fallout game or a role-playing game, it at least still delivers a fairly enjoyable experience, I would say. It really is a mixed bag mess of a game. I enjoy the open world exploration, but I detest the quest design. I really like the survival mechanics, even if I don't much care for the base building. I don't like how bad the writing is, except for those times where the writing is good. Usually whenever Nick Valentine is speaking, he's one of the best companions in the game. Hell, if not the entire Fallout series. I don't like how limited and predictable the dialogue system is, but I really do like the unpredictable nature of randomly generated legendary loot, which can sometimes turn an entire playthrough on its head whenever a superpowered weapon randomly drops, or a nice chunk of armor appears. That helps make each playthrough feel more customized. And the modding community has absolutely done some amazing work for this game. I love checking out these new adventures, new mechanics, new quests, characters, armor, weapons. I'm constantly being impressed with the talented work people have put in. So yeah, Fallout 4, it's not perfect. It's got some pretty noteworthy flaws. But that didn't stop me from having a good time eventually. And I'm sure I'll keep playing it well into the future. Telltale was a video game company that used to pump out licensed games. They had a Strong Bad game here, a Sam & Max game there, a Back to the Future game over here, and I had played some of those before in the past. They were all okay. They didn't do anything groundbreaking, I would say. It felt as if they were using the formula from the old Sierra games, the point-and-click adventure games. And you know, I grew up with King's Quest IV, so I was no stranger to that style of game. So I played these Telltale games, but none of them ever really amazed me. I thought they were good, decent enough, but I never went back to play them a second time. They were a fun experience, and then I moved on. But that changed with Telltale's The Walking Dead. Now, prior to playing this game, I was completely unfamiliar with The Walking Dead as a franchise. I had never heard of the TV show or read any of the comic books. It was just a video game about zombies, so I picked it up to see what it was like. And I thought I knew what to expect because it was a Telltale game and I had played those before. And in many ways it was quite similar, but this was actually a new step in the point-and-click adventure genre, I guess. The biggest change, and the one that really enamored me to this game, was the branching pathways, the multiple ways to respond to people talking to you. Someone could ask you a question and you had multiple options on how to respond. Or you could choose to not respond at all, to remain silent. And that was a valid choice to make. You could choose not to talk to somebody if you didn't like them. And it seems like such a simple thing to add a conversation role-playing element to these old point-and-click games, but it really did revolutionize this entire genre, and it certainly went on to influence the rest of Telltale's games as well. It's got a great story about a group of survivors trying not to die in this apocalyptic scenario where the zombies are coming at you out of the ground. The characters are very memorable, a lot of them are very endearing, and they've all got great voice actors.
Hey, Lee. You know how to pick a lock, right?
No. Why would you say that?
Well, you're, you know, urban?
Oh, you are not saying what I think you're saying.
Jesus, man, I'm from Florida. Crazy shit just comes out of my mouth sometimes. Sorry.
And I would say the pacing in this game is really good as well. because there are moments where there's a lot of action and you have to be quick on the draw, but there are also plenty of moments where it's a lot quieter. There's some downtime in between these zombie attacks, and you could explore around the area, find some tools you could use, try to help some people with their problems, talk to them about how they're feeling and what their plans are. And sometimes there are puzzles to solve. Sometimes a thing needs to happen and you gotta find a way to make that thing happen, and it might take you a while to figure it out. But a lot of what you're doing in this game is simply talking to people and making decisions. This is a game where you have to give your input and make choices, and people in the game will react to your choices, either positively or negatively. And it does make for a quite different experience from person to person. There was a character in my game who I became really good friends with. He and I saw eye to eye on a lot of different topics when it comes to survival and taking care of a family. But I have seen other people play this game, and the character that became my dear friend became their worst enemy. They did not gel with this character at all. And I would say that's a pretty amazing feat for the game to accomplish, to have a character that can be one player's best friend and a different player's worst enemy. That's kind of crazy. And sometimes the composition of your group does change, depending on the choices you make. Some people might survive, some people might choose to leave, some people might just outright die. And I really feel like that is the biggest strength of the video game medium. You can't do that with movies or TV shows, only with video games. And it is done so well here. To an extent. There are a lot of choices that get nullified along the way, and I'd say that's one of the biggest weaknesses of this game. There's a lot of winding pathways, but a lot of times they reconnect pretty quickly. Personally, I say it's more about the journey than the destination, but not everybody would agree. However, I thought this game was amazing when it was released. I made everybody that I could play it. I dragged all of my friends, my family. I put a controller in my dad's hand and tried to get him to play it. That didn't work out very well. God bless him, he tried. But I thought this game was really amazing, and it has still stuck with me all these years later. I thought Telltale really knocked it out of the park with this one. There are so many emotional character moments, or sections of the game that are very tense, or stressful, or harrowing, scary sometimes, not just jump scares, although sometimes, yes, jump scares, but also sometimes your group of survivors don't get along well with each other and things get very, very tense. Or you're exploring a building and it's very eerie, and you know that a single bite from a zombie you can't see means your death. For a game that is basically an interactive movie, it can be quite intense, and that is yet another reason why I really enjoy this game. If you haven't played this game before and you're interested, you should definitely check it out, because it's not a very long game. It's like 10 to 12 hours. It's really not a huge time commitment, but it does tell one of the greatest stories I've ever experienced in a video game. I really did enjoy it.
Actually, why don't you keep my share today? I owe you a lot more than half a day's rations.
I really enjoy the Pikmin games. I think Pikmin and Pikmin 2 are some of the best games that the GameCube has to offer. In fact, for the longest time, I kept the GameCube around just so I could play Pikmin and Pikmin 2. That's how much I enjoy these games. I kept an entire console around, and it was my Pikmin machine. When I was growing up, I thought the first game was pretty good, but pretty short, too. You can beat it in a couple of hours. And as a kid, that's kind of a letdown. But now that I'm an adult, it's actually the game I go back to the most frequently, because sometimes I've got an itch to play Pikmin, but I don't have an itch to commit 40 hours to playing an entire game of Pikmin from start to finish, so I just play the first game again, and I satisfy that itch, get it done in 3 hours, have a great time, and move on with my life. There's something insanely fun about collecting all these small, colorful creatures, commanding them to do your bidding, take down giant creatures, bring parts back to your ship so you can fix it up, make progress, and finally leave. Who's missing? Jeremy?
Wait, you have 6 seconds left,
Jeremy!
Mike.
Where are you going? Where is Jeremy?
You lost him in.
Jeremy! Jeremy, no!
Well, sucks to suck, Jeremy.
You start off exploring a map with your small army, and you start building up the troops, and you analyze your surroundings, and you think, well, there's a couple of things over here I definitely need to retrieve, and some things over here I need to do. How am I going to spend the day? Am I going to take my massive Pikmin and try and go from place to place? Or maybe I'll throw a couple over here and they can build this bridge over the next couple of minutes, and I'll have a couple over here, they'll transport this gear. Or maybe I'll just bring them all with me in case I encounter some strong enemies, I'll be able to take it down pretty quickly. And you're never sure just what's around the corner.
No! The ones that I left to build the wall!
Oh, you are a bad leader.
But then you go back and play this map again and you think, okay, I did pretty good the first time, but how could I make my progress more efficient? What is the best number of Pikmin to assign to this task? Do I want to assign more to it to get it done faster? Now that I know what other challenges await me on the other side of the map, how many do I think I can spare? Looking back, it seems like your original path through the map was clunky and you were just kind of bludgeoning your way through it, very clumsily solving problems. But now that you know what you're doing and you're familiar with the map, what is the most efficient way to get through it? It's all about optimization. And I'm a nerd, and I love that. Which is why I keep going back to it over and over, trying to get it done even faster, trying to reduce the amount of days it takes me to get to the end, trying to beat my score or get a better time. It's just so fun to replay. However, as a kid, I enjoyed Pikmin 2 a lot more, simply because it was so much more substantive. Instead of collecting 30 ship pieces, you're trying to now grab 200 wacky doodads? You're just going down to Earth and grabbing Duracell batteries and bottle caps, and it's just a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie, it feels like it's really cheap product placement, but it's done in such a way that I get excited whenever I see a product I'm familiar with. Does that make me a corporate whore? Possibly. But I'm having fun, and I'm not gonna apologize for that. Pikmin 2 was the best Pikmin game for so long, simply because we only had 2 Pikmin games for so long. So I played the hell out of Pikmin 2, and I loved just how much I could play this game for hours and hours on end. Unfortunately, you had to play for hours and hours on end because some of those dungeons you had to crawl through go on for quite a while. I did enjoy the elevated difficulty of this game at times. However, there was sometimes difficulty, we might call it bullshit difficulty. You know, you'd give your Pikmin a task, look away, turn back, and they're all exploding, and you're like, oh, the moment I looked away, you dropped a giant bomb on all my Pikmin. That's kind of a dick move. So as I've gotten older, I've come down off my Pikmin 2 high. It's still a great game, and I still do go back to it frequently and enjoy it. But it's harder for me to say that Pikmin 2 is the better Pikmin game these days. I'd say they're about equal. If I want to get a Pikmin fix, I'll play the first game, and if I want to play something more substantive, I'd play the second game. And that's just how it was for a long time. These were the 2 Pikmin games I played. They said Pikmin 3 was coming out for the Wii, and then it got pushed back a good decade until the Wii U came out, and no one ever owned a Wii U, so no one ever played Pikmin 3, and yeah, I largely skipped over it myself. I think I picked it up and played it for a bit, but yeah, I had waited too long for it. It was difficult to live up to the expectations that I just been waiting for it for too long. But it doesn't matter because Pikmin 4 came out, and I can say with confidence that Pikmin 4 is the definitive Pikmin game to play. If you're looking for a good Pikmin game, or just a good place to start, Pikmin 4 is the Pikmin game. It has surpassed Pikmin 2 as my favorite Pikmin game, I must say. It's so very well done. There's so much more substance, so many more things to find. The dungeons are frequent, but not nearly as tedious. There's new types of Pikmin to play around with, new puzzles, the battle mode, the timed mode. There's just so much to do. And the game continues the Pikmin trend of just looking beautiful. It just looks so good. And it's fun to run around a miniaturized world that vaguely resembles Earth. Vaguely. It might not be Earth. You don't know. It does so many great new things while also paying homage to the original games that came before it. All the types of Pikmin are back. The primary 3, the purples, the whites, the flying ones, and the rock ones, and now some ice ones. There's so much variety. There is so much jam-packed into this game. The Pikmin series is definitely underrated. It deserves a lot more love. And Pikmin 4 is unquestionably the best in the series. I mean, I guess you can question it, it's a matter of opinion, but personally, I'd say Pikmin 4 is the greatest entry in the series. I just hope we don't have to wait 10 years for a 5th entry, because that wait after Pikmin 2, that was a bit much. Star Fox 64 was the second game my family ever owned, so that means I have a great nostalgic fondness for it. But I think I enjoy it more as an adult and appreciate it more now than I did back then. You take a look at it and you think it's a silly little game about animals flying spacecraft shooting things out of the sky. And yeah, that's basically the entirety of the gameplay, but it controls very precisely, and a single run through the game takes less than 2 hours. But depending on your actions and how well you play, you can go through different paths, encounter new enemies. New things might happen to you depending on the route you've decided to take, or that you were forced to take. You're encouraged to play it repeatedly, going for the high score on each planet, maybe going for the high score of a run. And then there's the harder difficulty, which I already played through the entire game. Why would I want to play on a harder difficulty? Oh, because I get some sunglasses? Alright, I'm playing through the entire game again. There are a lot of other games that have space shooter segments, where you're playing something akin to Star Fox, but they never quite feel as tight or responsive. Star Fox 64 really nailed it. And the characters don't blather on for hours and hours. They speak in very succinct snippets, like you would expect over the radio in the middle of a firefight. They're not going to tell you their backstory. They're not going to go on a long diatribe. They'll just tell you the information you need to know, but they'll still do it in a colorful way that reflects their personality. It makes them memorable without being obnoxious. And as you play through the game multiple times, doing better on each run, they'll actually start to comment on that. You'll start hearing some slightly different voice lines playing as they gradually become more impressed with your flying and shooting skills.
We're gonna break through that fleet. You're becoming a better pilot.
There are 15 levels in the game, but 3 of them take a detour from the usual expectations. One of them's a submarine level, which is paced a bit slower. The submarine does not go very fast. Not everyone's a big fan, but it's only for 1 level, and I thought it was an interesting change of pace. And there are 2 levels where you're driving the Landmaster, a ground-based tank. And those are pretty good too. I think they're decent for one world. I wouldn't want to play the entire game in the tank, because flying around is a lot more fun. But for one planet, each run, yeah, I would take a diversion like this. Star Fox 64 is such a great game, such a near-perfect game, that there hasn't really been a Star Fox game since that matches it. There was Star Fox Adventures and Star Fox Assault and a handheld game that most people didn't play. And then they reimagined the exact same Star Fox 64 game, but with motion controls, and called it Star Fox Zero. And then they did a graphical update version called Star Fox 64 3DS. They keep on remaking Star Fox 64 because it's the best Star Fox game, and they can't really seem to top it. Which is a real shame, because I would love another great entry in the series. Please, give me Star Fox 65. I don't care what you call it, just give me another amazing Star Fox game. I love going through the game and finding new things. I must have played this game 100 times before I realized that if you don't accidentally shoot any of the very fragile allied ships on the Katrina level, then you get new dialogue from Bill congratulating you. I didn't know that.
I'm glad we're on the same team, Fox. You owe me one.
Some of you may be looking at that and thinking, what's the big deal? But there are people out there that are seeing that for the first time, and it's blowing their mind. Probably. I'm making an assumption here. In fact, I might be the only person who even cares about this. But again, your teammates don't really say a whole lot of new things, so when you stumble upon a new voice line, I don't know, it felt like a very big deal. I just sound like a crazy person, don't I? For the longest time, I would go through the game with the exact same 7 planets in a row, because those were the ones that gave you the best chance of getting a high score, to the point where I started to miss some of the other levels. I missed some of the planets on the easy path because I just never saw them, so I would purposefully have to go out of my way to go on the easier routes just so I could revisit some of the fun moments from the easy planets. I feel like I'm running out of things to say here, because there's not really a whole lot to say. It's Star Fox 64. What you see is what you get. It's a fun experience. It doesn't take long to beat the game. In fact, if you started playing Star Fox 64 when this video started, you're probably halfway to the end of the game at this point. Okay, maybe it's not that short, but still. I'm very happy to play a game these days that respects my time enough not to drag on forever. Star Fox 64, you are a great game.
All aircraft report.
When I was a kid, I was very unaware of the Super Nintendo's existence. But growing up in the early days of the internet, it was the Wild West, and it was easy for me to stumble upon an emulator and play emulated games. I wasn't aware of the questionable legality of doing such a thing, but I found a wide library of very fun games. And one of the first games that I played was Chrono Trigger. I loaded it up and started playing. And pretty early in the game, you learn that a princess has been kidnapped, so your goal is to rescue the princess. Sounds like a familiar pretense. And about 2 hours later, after doing a bit of time traveling, I had rescued the princess. And I honestly thought that's where the game was going to end. In my experience, PC games tended to be very short. I had played a lot of browser games and flash games, so I figured that was all the game I was going to get. Imagine my surprise to learn that I had only scratched the surface of an amazing experience. The story wastes no time in drawing you in. A big fair, go out there and have fun. Oh no, a malfunctioning time machine, a missing princess, a talking frog swordsman. Beat after beat, the story progresses at a very quick pace. Every hour, you're introduced to a new perilous situation. The stakes continue being raised until you learn that the future of the planet is in danger. And that's only in the first few hours of the game. There's still the entire rest of the game. Your characters will level up quickly, unlock new moves every few minutes, giving you more tools to play around with. We haven't used the ice sword or the fire sword techniques yet.
We'll do that on this bird up here.
Luca learned napalm.
Say what?
But the enemies don't just wait around for you to attack. If you take too long, they'll lash out. They'll move around the battlefield and make hitting them a bit more difficult, or making it easier for you to hit multiple enemies at once, so maybe you do want to hold on to your attack for a little bit longer. There's a nice, tight cast of characters, very fun, very flavorful, from different time periods and different backgrounds, each infused with their own combat speciality. Some teams, if you take them into battle, aren't going to be good for a particular situation, but you never have to go back and grind to level up your team. You just need to figure out what combination of characters, what abilities work best for any given situation.
Laser spin!
Whoop, 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 pew, pew,
Enjoy
pew,
the light
pew.
show.
That healed them.
Okay, skeletons absorb dark magic. Good to know.
Whoa! Holy!
The more you experiment with team combinations and team combo moves, the more prepared you'll be for any eventuality. And that's another thing that sets this RPG apart from its contemporaries. Combo moves. You can put two characters together and they'll unleash a very different attack. Instead of having one character cast a fire spell and a different character attack with their sword, why not combine the two and have a physically damaging fire sword attack? Sure, one of your characters could heal the team one member at a time, or she can combine her healing powers with a different character and heal everybody at once. And later in the game, you even unlock triple combos. That's where the fun really begins. Which isn't to imply that the fun ever stopped, but it's a game that just keeps getting better and better as you play through it. For its time, the sprite work was beautiful, and the music also beautiful. So much of this game is beautiful, and maybe as a kid, I didn't fully appreciate it as much as I could have. But looking back, it really is just an amazing package. The game is relatively short, at least for an RPG, which is great because it's also highly replayable. There's multiple endings, and you can unlock them as you go back and beat the game in different ways. It's an RPG without tedium. It's an open world that's not a nightmare to explore. All of the side quests feel worth your time. Even if they're optional, you want to do them because they don't feel like busy work. I love to explore the world, I love listening to the soundtrack, I'm fond of the characters, and I like trading them out, trying to figure out what combination is best for each scenario. Of all the games that I played for the Super Nintendo, this is the one in which I became the most immersed. I always loved going back to this game and feeling like I was right there, traveling this world. It was a good bit of escapism, and even as an adult, I loved going back to it time and time again. The late 90s were overflowing with cartoony mascot platformers, but one that stands among the best has got to be Banjo Kazooie. It simply is an amazing platforming game. The controls are incredibly tight, and the worlds are a lot of fun to explore. Big enough to stay interesting, but not so big that you get bogged down in exploring them. Being an amazingly fun platforming game on its own would be enough, but the characters are very enjoyable as well. You play as a bear with a bright blue backpack and even brighter yellow shorts, who carries around a bright red bird in the backpack, which he utilizes to perform various combo moves.
Oh, and again. One more time. No!
You ran into him. I wasn't ready.
What's wrong, Banjo? Is it tough? Let me know when you've had enough.
Oh my god, shut your dumb face, you stupid wench.
As a kid, these worlds felt a lot bigger, and so going through them felt like an adventure. The first level is relatively easy, but still a lot of fun. The second one, Treasure Trove Cove, is very popular. It might be the strongest level in the game, based on popular opinion. The third level's fun, the fourth level's fun, the fifth level's great! It's probably the best wintry, Christmassy level I've ever played in a video game. Followed immediately by the haunted level, which is another strong contender. It's only when you get toward the end of the game that some of the more frustrating levels appear. Rusty Bucket Bay is still phenomenal, but there are a couple of incredibly frustratingly difficult sections. Specifically the one with a bottomless floor, and if you fall into it, you lose all your progress and you gotta start over collecting all those notes. It really isn't fun. And then the final level has an amazing idea in concept. Climbing a different tree over the course of 4 seasons, watching the leaves blossom, hatching an eagle and watching it grow through the seasons, the landscape changing as piles of leaves or blankets of snow build up. But admittedly, it is one of the most tedious levels in the game because you have to keep on going up a tree, and it's a very vertical level, and if you slip, you fall, you gotta start all the way back over again. But even still, it's one of my favorite platforming games of all time, and one of my favorite games, bar none. It does so many things right. I feel like if a lot of 3D platformer collectathon games could have been like the original Banjo Kazooie, maybe the genre wouldn't have fallen out of favor. Now, I enjoy the sequel, Banjo Tooie, a lot as well, but it's a bit more of a chore to play that one. Gathering the collectibles can be a lot more effort. The worlds are a lot bigger, and sometimes, well, oftentimes, emptier. So traversing them isn't always the quickest thing, especially when you have to keep rotating between multiple playable characters. I wish I liked the second game more because there are a lot of fun elements, but for every improvement it makes on the original game, it also takes a step back and makes things a bit worse. But Banjo Kazooie is almost perfect the way it is. There are just a few tweaks here and there. I think the requirements to get to the final boss are a bit excessive. You need to gather 96 out of the 100 major collectibles, so that's the vast majority of the game you have to play. You can't just pick and choose the ones you want. But just because I don't think it's absolutely perfect doesn't mean I don't think it's great, because it is great. I love going back to this game time and time again. It's so satisfying how immediate and snappy everything is. You run over a collectible, it plays a jingle, and you got it. You have the thing. It's a non-stop barrage of gathering things.
How many is that now? 3?
You always feel like you're making progress. You're never spinning your wheels. Every time I play it, I have a great time, and it makes me want to play more Banjo Kazooie. So I will inevitably boot up the sequel and remember that, yeah, it makes some mistakes and it's not as good as the original. And that's a shame because I believe Banjo Kazooie could have been a really long-lasting series. We could have had more than 2 mainline entries and a car crafting spin-off game. It's so frustrating that we haven't had a good Banjo Kazooie game in, like, what, 2 decades now? 3? People love these characters. I enjoy these characters. I really wish they hadn't been left to languish the way they have, because they deserve So much more. They deserve at least one more great game. Sometimes I daydream about a world where Banjo Kazooie is a well-renowned video game series. Every few years, there's one more amazing release that everyone looks forward to. It's up there with Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, games that might not get an annual release, but people look forward to the next great entry in the series. It has that potential, I know it does, but instead it's been left by the wayside. Bring back the bear with the blue backpack and the Breagle bird. Bring them back, please? No? Okay, well, guess I'll go back and play the original Banjo Kazooie for the 10th time.
Youth transferred to mistress.
Damn. Those N64 dimensions, though.
Hey, she's got the polygons where it counts. And there's my little sister!
Oh, no!
Banjo.
Oh, no!
Your sister wants a word with you.
Uh-oh. Stinky!
The Ratchet and Clank video game series is one of my favorites of all time. If I were to list each individual entry as a candidate for my top 25 games list of all time, it'd probably start hogging 5, 6, 7 different slots. It's just a great series and I love it so much. All the way back to the first game, which came out in 2002, the series has been great and has stayed strong since. It does not matter which entry you pick up and play, you're going to have a fun time. Whether it's the first game, or Going Commando, or Up Your Arsenal, or even Deadlocked, or the future trilogy, which includes Tools of Destruction, Quest for Booty, A Crack in Time, and there's also Into the Nexus, all great games. And I haven't yet played Rift Apart, the latest entry, but I'm looking forward to it because I know it's going to be just as fun. If you've never played these games before, and you've only seen screenshots or videos of it, you might think it's a simple mascot platformer from an era of oversaturated mascot platformers. But you couldn't be more partially wrong. It is one of the best mascot platformers, combined with the unique aspect of having a wide variety of weapons to play around with. Every game includes at least a dozen fun weapons to experiment with, usually 2 or 3 dozen.
Look at how fun that is! Oh my gosh, I love them!
You're bound to find one that personally appeals to you. Yeah, you have the typical blaster, the shotgun, the grenade launcher, the rockets. There's usually a smattering of those. Then there's the more wacky weapons. The suck cannon, which allows you to draw enemies in and fire them out as projectiles at bigger enemies. A gun that turns enemies into farm animals like chickens or sheep.
Get chickenized! Get chickenized, everyone!
Oh no, we accidentally transformed the health pack into a chicken too! A gun that spews a stream of lava, so you do flips and stuff, and the lava just sprays around you, and it's just so fun. Ratchet and Clank themselves are a very enjoyable duo of protagonists. A cat-like creature who straps a small robot onto his back that can be upgraded to soar and glide through the air, or jet along through the water faster. Their personalities sometimes clashing, with Ratchet being a bit more reckless and rambunctious compared to the more reserved and thoughtful Clank, going up against a wide variety of adversaries and antagonists until they introduce Dr. Nefarious, and then he becomes like the recurring antagonist that you see a lot of. But that's okay because we all really like Dr. Nefarious, he's a fun villain.
Oh, Janice, you'll always be the love of my life.
You really should have that looked at.
There's probably a lot I could say about this series, because I like it so much, but the bottom line is, it is just fun to sit down, pick a couple of guns, and just start running through the level, blasting the things that get in your way, doing some skillful, artful jumps, maybe doing some grind rails here, some low gravity blasting over there, mix in a couple of puzzles or mini games to break up the pacing a bit, and then go back to blasting, shooting enemies so hard your weapons upgrade and get stronger. It's always fun to see what your weapons are going to upgrade into, what new abilities they'll acquire as they get stronger. Rarely does it feel unfairly difficult, but scarcely does it feel too easy either. It's just run and gun fun.
I think you'll enjoy being a robot.
Let's see if you can fight better than you can sing.
I feel like most people, if they haven't played Sly Cooper before, take one look at this game and think it's another one of those 3D mascot platformers from the 90s. Games that were a dime a dozen. They were just throwing mascot platformers at the wall. And honestly, for the first game at least, that's not too far off the mark. The first game does feel like it's hindered by being a relic of its time. It feels very much like a fairly generic 3D platformer with some stealth theming. It was also relatively short, able to be completed in a few hours. And if that were the only game in the Sly Cooper franchise, then people still wouldn't be talking about it today. It's good for what it does, but it is also nothing groundbreaking. That all changed with the second game, Sly 2: Band of Thieves, as well as Sly 3: Honor Among Thieves, which heavily incorporated stealth elements and made it more of a stealth platformer hybrid. Something that feels very unique and was really well done. The levels are no longer a linear obstacle course for platforming. They're a lot more open, and you can traverse it in the way you see fit. You can stay to the rooftops, out of the line of sight from all the guards. You can run down the streets, hiding in nearby barrels or under vehicles when a guard comes by. That strategy might put you more at risk, but you might also be able to find guards who are carrying valuable loot, which you now have the ability to pickpocket off them with your deft, sly hands. Each level now feels like its own stealth operation. You begin by doing a bit of reconnaissance, you bring the intelligence back to your safe house, plan out the different resources you need, acquire them, setting up all the dominoes so that when you're finally ready, you can perform a heist, infiltrate a gang leader's hideout, and steal their valuables out from underneath them, without them ever realizing, hopefully. There are a number of fun tools and abilities that help you with your stealth operations. You've got binoculars that allow you to scope out an area before you try to run through it, a smoke bomb you can use to disappear from sight, or an alarm clock you can throw to distract enemies. Or if you haven't acquired the alarm clock yet, you can just break something, make some noise, distract a guard to get them away from their post, and then sneak by them. There's usually more than one way to sneak through an area, and I definitely appreciate that freedom of expression. So yeah, it's a well-made game, but why is it one of my favorites? Because it's deceptively mature. You look at this game and you think, oh, it's a little cartoon platformer stealth game where you're controlling an anthropomorphic raccoon with no pants. How silly. And he's got a turtle friend and a hippo friend that join him for his missions. Isn't that fun? Only to find out that these three characters feel incredibly human. These silly cartoon characters go through a lot of personal growth that you would not expect. There are moments of failure and heartbreak, followed by the joy and jubilation of bouncing back, overcoming one's challenges. It's a story about people figuring out who they are, which is something they didn't have to put into this children's adventure platforming game. This game is rated E for everyone, and yet it still tells a very eloquent, mature story, coupled with the fact that sneaking around and platforming along rooftops is a lot of fun. It's no wonder I keep coming back to these games. And I haven't even talked about the amazing level design, the different bosses you can come across, the gang leaders, and their boss fights. I want to talk in detail about the different story elements, the plot twists, the moments that had an emotional impact on me, how it was so fun to watch not just the heroes, but also sometimes the villains grow and mature. The presentation of the game feels very cartoony, from the thick black outlines around each character, to the distorted and angular buildings, the animated cutscenes, and that title card. Feels like it's right out of a 90s Saturday morning cartoon. It makes you think that you know what you're getting into, only to end up being a bit surprised on what the reality of it is. Looks can be deceiving.
Yeah.
You gotta do the spire spin.
Yes, I did.
That's in the back one of the last pages of the Thievius Raccoonus, the Spire Spin.
The Spire Spin, yeah.
Yes, my ancestor, who was a little, well, we loved him regardless. He taught us the Spire Spin.
His name was Sly Cooper.
Sly Cooper. His mother named him that. She was very vindictive.
As a matter of fact, that was her name, Vindictive Cooper.
Vindictive Cooper. Imagine that you wake up one day, having your morning coffee and reading your morning newspaper, when suddenly you hear a knock on the door. That's a doorbell, but whatever. You open the door and come face to face with a man who tells you you've won the astronaut lottery. You've just been appointed NASA's newest astronaut. And you say, well, I don't know the first thing about being an astronaut. And they say, it doesn't matter. This thing basically flies itself. You have your own personal spacecraft, capable of traversing long distances in the blink of an eye. And the only mission that we have for you is to explore the galaxy and find some cool stuff. And you say, hold on, I need to talk this over with my wife and child. And they say, sure, take your time. Okay, my family says they're cool with this. Great, here's your spaceship. Have fun. And so your grand space adventure begins. The entire solar system is yours to explore. Where do you want to go first? Perhaps your first destination is the moon. Yes, that white sphere in the sky you've admired for so many nights as a child. You fly your spaceship to the lunar surface, land, and start walking around. You enjoy bouncing around with the reduced gravity, and you successfully discover the original lunar landing site. Look, it's that flag that was on MTV. And you stare in awe at your new view of Earth, that marvelous blue marble that you call home. After soaking it all in, you decide to become the first person to ever set foot on Mars. You fly there in the blink of an eye and start orbiting the planet, scanning the surface, looking for a place to land. However, something catches your eye. In the distance, you spot a cave, the entrance of which is braced with ornate pillars that are clearly not natural. You touch down nearby and enter the cave, all the while pondering who could have built those pillars and why. You travel through the winding cave path, which dead ends at a wall with some alien writings on it. You bust out your universal language translator tool and decipher just what was written here. From the alien writings, you learn that there used to be a planet in between Mars and Jupiter, but the aliens built a laser weapon on Jupiter that completely obliterated it, the remains of which became the asteroid belt that you are familiar with. You exit the cave and return to your ship, your mind overflowing with new questions. Why blow up a planet? Why build a weapon on Jupiter? Can you even build something on a gas giant? You decide it's time to set a new course for Jupiter and find out for yourself. That's basically Outer Wilds in a nutshell. It's a video game that most perfectly encapsulates the idea of exploration. There's so many cool things out there. There's always a new celestial body begging to be investigated, a new alien ruin enticing you in, a new mystery crying out to be solved. Even just by walking around the starting town, folks will tell you about curious phenomena worthy of your time. Did you know another astronaut recently went missing? They've been gone for a while now. Maybe you can find them during your travels? Also, have you checked out the museum? There's a strange new statue they found. They brought it back from a different planet, and we don't know why it was made. Maybe you can investigate that. Also, aim your directional microphone at the moon. Do you hear it? The moon is whistling. Why does it sound like the moon is whistling? There are moments of cathartic relaxation, roasting marshmallows at a campfire to restore lost health, or gently drifting through space, taking it all in. But there are also moments of intense stress as you feebly struggle against crushing gravity, or try to explore a cave system that's slowly filling up with sand and I can't find the exit. Where's the exit? I'm running out of room. Help! Help! It's a somber game, filled with stories of tragedy and sadness. You learn about the lives and deaths of the aliens that came before you, their hopes that were crushed, and their dreams that never came true. But it's also a joyful game, filled with fun personalities and uplifting music. It's also silly at times, because every player will underestimate a planet's gravitational pull, or die at least once, simply because they forgot to put on their spacesuit before exiting their ship.
Oh, I'm dying! I'm dying!
In all honesty, I didn't fully appreciate just how good this game was until after I had finished it. The open-ended exploration it provides is a double-edged sword, as 2 of the first locations I chose to visit turned out to be the most frustrating ones the game had to offer.
Oh no!
Furthermore, I found it difficult to cope with the absence of quest logs and waypoint markers. I often found myself unsure of where to go next or what to do, and this lack of direction often left me frustrated. Now, the game does tell you where to go if you read all the notes you've been gathering, but I had been so used to ignoring in-game notes as nothing more than world-building faff that I tended to skip over them pretty quickly. However, once I learned to slow down to think about the ramifications of what I had just read, it became a lot clearer what I needed to do. Still, I often found myself coming up with dead-end strategies and leads that didn't go anywhere. At times, the only way I could make progress was by staring at the information board for a few minutes, just thinking over the information I had learned previously and what I could possibly do with it. Other times, simply standing still and slowly observing the world around me would lead to me noticing things I had previously overlooked. And with enough patience, I was able to unlock some of this universe's most well-hidden mysteries. Outer Wilds is an unparalleled experience. It makes you confront the horrors of the unknown and the existential terror of your own insignificance within a cold and uncaring universe, the magnitude of which is beyond our comprehension. But it also showcases the joys of overcoming struggle, the satisfaction in finding solutions, and those intimate moments in which you reflect on the fact that other people are sharing this universe with you. However, this is a game you can only experience once. You can't unlearn puzzle solutions or experience that sense of discovery a second time. So if you decide to play it for yourself, I recommend that you take the time to savor it while you can. Take your time with it, soak it in. Don't be in such a hurry to get it over with that you forget to enjoy it. And if you had a great time, don't forget to play the DLC, the Echoes of the Eye, because that's just as good as the main campaign. In fact, for me, I had a better time with the DLC than the main game, simply because I finally understood just how to play a game like this, so I was ready for it this time. And once I had finished the DLC, I was still craving more of that Outer Wilds goodness. Luckily, there are some great fan-made mods out there too, that do a pretty good job of recapturing the spirit of Outer Wilds. They've got their own stories to tell, mysteries to unlock, and puzzles to solve. I guess it's a sign of just how much I enjoy this game, that I'm clawing and scraping for any experience that rivals it. Very few games can pull off this enticing blend of exploration with this curious mystery that you, over time, develop an inclination to want to solve. Nothing quite reaches the absolute peak of Outer Wilds. Super Mario 64. You know, when I first played this game back in 1996, I'm not sure I appreciated just what an amazing game it truly was at the time. It wasn't just great for the time it came out in, it also set a high bar for all subsequent mascot platformers, which is a genre that defined the entire generation. Considering the giant technological leap that this game was, it's kind of amazing that it continues to hold up today as well as it does. The controls are still incredibly tight and responsive, collecting things is fun and not terribly tedious, and the entire game world just feels like a joy to play. You got your cheerful, grassy levels, your charming snow levels, your hazardous lava world, desert world, cave world, water world. None of these levels are so big that you get bored of them, but they're also big enough for you to become immersed, wondering what's just around the corner. And make no mistake, this game oozes with mystery, with many secrets hidden everywhere, just waiting to be discovered. The signposts dotted around sometimes hold clues, but most of the time you'll stumble across things naturally as you explore, discovering new things at your own pace. For example, there's a rabbit always running around the castle's flooded basement. He runs away when you get close, so your natural instinct is to chase him. Eventually, you corner him in a dead-end corridor and lunge at him to grab him, but when you inevitably miss, you'll bonk your head into the wall, which will ripple strangely. Jumping into it reveals, well, I don't want to spoil it, but trust me when I say that this game is packed with secrets. If you stop to smell the roses, you might find yourself teleporting to a new location. Try to collect a row of coins, and you might find a secret passageway behind a wall. Sometimes you'll enter a world and everything will be normal. You'll jump around, collect coins, see stars. But when you return a second time, the entire place could be flooded for seemingly no reason. I remember back in the day, there were a ton of rumors floating around about Luigi being a secret playable character. I myself fell for the rumors that he could be unlocked by jumping over the rocking crate on the pirate ship 64 consecutive times. By today's standards, this probably seems very silly. But honestly, you can't fault people for believing that he could be here, just waiting to be unlocked. Wikis and game facts and YouTube guides didn't really exist back in the day, or at least they weren't well known. And because of how many other secrets were constantly being discovered, the whole game felt shrouded in mystique. This game also, I'm embarrassed to say it, but it scared the heck out of me. I'm sure there are a lot of people that remember the scary haunted ghost mansion level, populated with booze and the deeply unsettling music. There was also that creepy carousel and giant floating eyeball. They all made the whole level feel like a living nightmare. And of course, the deceptively benign piano. You know, that innocent-looking piano that you need to walk around in order to grab a red coin. 10-year-old Mike was not ready for these things. Probably took 20 years off my life. But this wasn't the only world that terrified me either. Jolly Roger Bay had that giant eel with the dead eyes that screams at you when you get close. There was that giant fish in Tiny Big World that would swallow you whole. And the toxic gas in the hazy maze cave that would cause you to choke, cough, and die. There are so many ways to asphyxiate in this game. It's downright traumatizing. Watching Mario drown, struggling through his last breaths as his limp body floats to the surface. Moments like this completely scared me away from certain levels. I was not having any of it. In fact, the first time I beat this game, I did it without getting any stars from Jolly Roger Bay or Tiny Huge Island. And that's another of the game's strengths. Unless you're going for 100% completion, almost every level in this game is optional. There are 120 stars to find and collect, but you only need 70 to beat the game. If one of the levels is too tough, or too scary, or you just hate it for whatever reason, you can skip it entirely. The ability to move on and come back later when any one particular level becomes too frustrating is incredibly undervalued. This is one of the biggest things that sets it apart from its contemporaries. So many other games that I love have mandatory sections that I dread to revisit, because they're frustrating, or tedious, or mind-numbingly boring. But I gotta do them if I want to beat the game. Looking at you, Grunty Industries. But not Super Mario 64. Entire levels can be skipped at your discretion. Beat the game on your own terms. Do what you want. That is true freedom. The game also isn't strict with how you complete its missions. The open nature of the levels, combined with Mario's incredible mobility, means you can often find ways to complete objectives in unintentional ways. To get the star, you need to go over to this platform over here, you need to walk over there, you need to ride this platform, navigate to these fiery spouts, jump on top of this log, roll it over the platform over here, and then walk down this ramp to the star, or you just fly to it. You can just fly to it. I can't think of any good tactics to get over here that don't involve, like, riding this arm. It might be faster this way anyway. Yeah, it's just faster that way. It's just faster to drop down from above it. My favorite example of this is the star in Tall Tall Mountain called Blast to the Lonely Mushroom. Called so because the game expects you to fire yourself out of a cannon and blast yourself at the star. And while I have gotten the star this way in the past, I find it very tricky to aim and not overshoot or undershoot. So for the longest time, I would just climb further up the mountain and long jump off. You take some fall damage doing it this way, and I don't always land it, but it is legitimately an easier way to nab this star. However, on my most recent attempt, I discovered an even easier method. I bounced off a flying Shy Guy and just kind of hovered my way down there. It was so much easier. I've seen speedrunners ignore all these options and grab a bouncy box nearby, and they use it and catapult themselves to the star, but I've never been able to pull it off successfully. Figuring out what the game wants you to do is fun, but trying to find ways to push Mario to his limits and try and get stars in a way you weren't supposed to, that adds a whole new level of depth. Overall, this game does almost everything right, and I struggle to think of negative things to say about it. I guess I personally don't care much for either of the water levels, but they're short and easy enough, and I love their music, and like I said, they're optional. If I don't want to go there, I don't have to go there. I also sometimes wish I could grab every level's star at the same time, instead of the game kicking me back to the hub world after grabbing each one. But that's all I can think of. Even getting nitpicky, that's it. The game is just so dang good. It's 100% pure platforming bliss, with nothing distracting from that. Just the sheer freedom to go where you want and do what you want. It's so liberating, and the game never stops being fun. Super Mario 64 has aged like a fine wine. It's still the king of 3D platformers, and it continues to outshine other similar games that are being released to this day, over 2 decades later, and people are still struggling to live up to the level of quality that this game provides. The Mass Effect trilogy is an amazing journey. Everybody should be so lucky to experience this at least once in their lifetime. These games are absolute masterpieces. The charming characters, the action-packed gameplay, and the awe-inspiring space travel all work together to put on one heck of a show. Every location you visit is breathtaking, from the incredibly varied planets you visit to the complex hub worlds you can explore, inhabited by a bunch of interesting humans and non-humans. The whole thing feels surreal and beautiful. One minute you're shooting robots and rescuing soldiers on a garden planet. The next you find yourself in the galactic hub world, center for commerce and diplomatic relations. You're talking to tentacle monsters and elephant-looking aliens. Then somebody hands you the keys to a spaceship and says, "Go save the galaxy." But instead of doing that, you immediately fly to a random planet and start driving around on the surface, because nobody can stop you. Now, there are plenty of video game trilogies out there that reach a high mark of quality, but what makes Mass Effect stand out above the rest is how well all 3 games intertwine with each other. When your character is imported into a subsequent game, it's not just your stats and your appearance that are brought over, it also imports the decisions you made, and the events of the game will unfold in various ways depending on what you did previously. Citizens of the galaxy will hear about the things you've said and done, and they'll react appropriately.
Shepard.
Balak.
You should have killed me on that asteroid over Terra Nova.
Characters that could have died but were kept alive by your actions will make reappearances and cameos, sometimes having a major impact on future quests, and not always for the better. The end result of all these branching choices is a truly customized story experience that feels uniquely tailored to the person playing it. Choices have actual consequences. A lot of games try to make that claim, but most of them don't deliver. But Mass Effect? Yeah, it delivers.
What I'll do is give you a chance to prove your apology meant something.
Yeah, he's not letting that go.
Yeah, well, it's understandable. I did kind of
screw over his entire race.
Yeah.
The overarching plot of the trilogy revolves around an intergalactic threat that you slowly learn about as you progress. What seems like a small story of corruption quickly spirals out of control to reveal that there's something out there that poses a bit of an existential threat to all life in the galaxy. On the surface, this is what it's all about, a vague, shapeless mystery that you slowly develop an understanding of and deal with as you progress. But the real focus of the game is actually on the characters, specifically the crew that joins you on your world-saving quests. You'll spend a lot of time talking to them in between assignments, and oftentimes during the mission as well. They've each got their own opinions on what the best course of action might be, and they'll react to the choices you make based on who they are. They add a lot of replay value to the game, as you can only take 2 squad mates with you for each mission. So every time you redo a mission with different companions, you're likely to hear new dialogue, or even learn some new and important information.
Tarek, what's eating your ass? Zaid,
You know this asshole Zaid?
We worked together once.
Since when do you work for so little?
Since when are you a goddamn madman?
And for the first game, you gotta respect the world building they did. Not only did they need to create a fun game with great combat and role-playing elements, but they also had to draw players in and entice them to make them want to learn about the world. And this wasn't done by giving them a boring codex to memorize. I mean, the codex is there, but you can mostly ignore it if you want to. Instead, the game tells you about its universe through your squad mates. As I said earlier, you're able to talk to them in between missions, and they'll have a lot to say. But as they tell you about their personal struggles, not only will you be learning about them, you'll be learning about the societies and cultures that have affected them. You'll learn a lot about new alien races simply by talking to your teammates about random stuff. And it's not just the aliens either. Talking to Ashley about her military background means you're learning about the interspecies war that her family was involved with. And talking to Caden about his background allows you to learn a lot about biotics, Element Zero, implant retrofits, and other things that are integral to the fictional universe that you might not have a clue about. There was also something a bit magical about the first game that the later games lacked, and just how massive everything felt. The Citadel hub world was dauntingly large and sometimes a bit complicated to navigate. There are large sections of planets that need to be traversed by vehicle, and quite a few missions require you to explore a new hub world before you progress. And when you do travel to a planet, it never fully fits on your screen. It gives these planets a sense of weight and scale, emphasizing just how small you are when placed against these massive celestial bodies. With the first game doing a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to world building, the second game is able to relax and live in the universe a bit more, which allows it to focus on more individual stories, and that's what the second game does best. Having a large crew of various humans and aliens who have very engaging personal stories. The quantity of the characters is daunting, and nearly each one of them has a mission to recruit them, and yet another mission after that to make each one of them more mission ready. To put it into perspective, Mass Effect 2 has less than 10 missions in the main quest, but over 20 missions that revolve around either recruiting or improving your team. That's how much effort the game focuses on them. And so this leads into the final game of the trilogy and what it does best: giving you consequences for your choices. Although your decisions from Mass Effect 1 don't have the greatest effect on the second game, Mass Effect 3 is perhaps one of the most divergent games ever made. At this point in the story, many plot-critical characters have the potential to be dead, and the game has to find ways to compensate and adapt while still trying to tell a fairly linear story. Nearly everything has different variations to accommodate for the player's past choices. It's something that's even reflected in your crew roster. In the first two games, all players had access to the same squad mates. But in Mass Effect 3, that's no longer the case. There are 8 possible crewmates, but half that roster could be dead, or otherwise unavailable depending on your actions. Which is kind of insane! They put a lot of effort into all these possible squad mates, and they're just dead. So many of them are just dead. And holy cow, I almost forgot to talk about the multiplayer! Yeah, the original Mass Effect 3 had the multiplayer mode. That was a lot of fun. I know a lot of people, myself included, were incredibly skeptical about it being good because the Mass Effect series is a single-player story-based experience. Why is the development team investing time and energy into tacking on some half-assed multiplayer mode, I thought. But it was good! I put so many hours into it! These short missions to defend a small outpost, they were repetitive, sure, but it was so fun to play as all the different aliens in the series. There is something truly amazing about role-playing a Geth Prime, fighting alongside a Batarian, a Vorcha, and a Volus. And I know loot crates have a negative perception these days, but it was so satisfying to play for 20 minutes, open a mystery box, and unlock a new playable class to experiment with. But everybody has their favorites, and it's always interesting to see who you're going to get randomly grouped up with. It's honestly a shame that this mode wasn't included in the Legendary Edition re-release because it's still a lot of fun. It's showing its age, sure, but it was good. It's still good. I went back and played it not too long ago, and it is still enjoyable. And there's still a hearty community playing it to this day. Anyway, I don't know how much more I can say about this game series. Mass Effect Trilogy is awesome. What more? What more can I even say? It's not much of a surprise, is it? Fallout New Vegas is my favorite video game of all time. What can I say? It's changed my life for the better in the way that not any other video game has. But beyond that, it's just a really good game. Probably the best open world RPG that I have played. I really appreciate just how much freedom this game gives you. And that's really the biggest strength, is how much freedom you get. You can build your character however you choose. There's no predetermined backstory. There's no preset motivation for why you want to play the game. It just lets you loose and lets you figure out what you want to do and what your motivations are. In some ways, it's a power fantasy. Everyone in the game is susceptible to being killed. Nobody has plot armor. If you want to play as a complete sociopath and gun everybody down, that is a viable way to play the game. But more importantly for me, it allows the player to get through the game killing hardly anybody. Being a complete pacifist and renouncing violence is a largely valid playstyle. And I gotta say, it's a breath of fresh air. I know this game is older than a lot of modern releases, but going back to it always feels refreshing, because I honestly just get tired of these modern RPGs where you have to kill waves upon waves of nameless enemies, raiders, bandits, pirates. It is a prerequisite for these games to have a kill count in the hundreds, if not thousands. It is mandatory, but not New Vegas. New Vegas says it's an option, and not even the most optimal option. In fact, you're largely discouraged from being a homicidal maniac because it is a game that wants you to care about the characters, to actually want to earn their trust and build up a strong reputation with the factions you align with. Almost no quest is mandatory. If you don't like a mission, you just don't do that mission. And if you don't like a faction, you either ignore or eliminate that faction. Most quests have multiple ways to resolve them. Sure, violence is an option, usually suboptimal. You can also put a lot of legwork in, a little bit of elbow grease, and spend some time with people to actually get a more optimal outcome. And depending on your character build, and sometimes previous choices, you might even find a shortcut to a peaceful resolution. Or maybe not peaceful, but an outcome you'd prefer. The multiple different ways to complete quests or subvert them entirely, combined with the multiple endings you can get, means that this game has a lot of replayability. And I have gone back and beaten it several times, as I'm sure a lot of people have. And every single time I go back to it, I find more secrets tucked away, more things I didn't know about the game. There is so much I can say about this game that I simply don't have the time for today. It has oh so many strengths, but also it's got its weaknesses, its flaws, and in general, it's just not going to be a game for everyone. I know there are people out there who wouldn't consider this the best game of all time, or even the best Fallout. But I think it's great, and I think there are a lot of games out there being released, these modern open-world RPGs, that are still falling flat, failing to live up to the lofty expectations set by this game. And not only is the game itself incredibly strong, but also the modding community has been amazing. There are so many great mods out there to improve the quality of life, adding more modern mechanics, new quests and adventures, and fun things to find. There are dozens of mods for Fallout New Vegas that are more enjoyable than Fallout 4, and there are hundreds more enjoyable than Fallout 76. Is that an exaggeration? No, I think I could probably find 200 mods I'd rather play than Fallout 76. I have had so much fun with this game over the last decade, and I foresee myself enjoying it for many years to come. Honestly, I could talk about this game for hours, and maybe sometime in the future I'll do an incredibly comprehensive and way too deep, over-analytical piece on it, talking about every little minute detail. But for now, I just want to say that it is my #1 game of all time, the one I've probably spent the most time in. I really enjoyed the game, and enjoyed the mods for it, and enjoyed making mods for it myself, playing around with the modding creation kit. engaging with the community, and seeing what unique and interesting stories these mod authors have to tell. It's just great.